Hello, I'm Rob Perez.
Grassroots coach Manisha Taylor.
Christian Carambeu.
Matt Hodgson, director of the 4-year plan.
I'm Rob Lusher.
Dave McLaughlin.
Andy Copeland from the Glemnet Southern Amateur League.
Philip Wick, I'm CEO of 14.
Former chairman of Ibis FC.
Chairman of Alexandra Park FC.
And you're watching
Pitch Talk.
Pitch Talk.
The only place to get your Monday night footballing fix.
The pitch is where we eat.
The pitch is where we sleep.
And the pitch is where we talk. Make sure you join the revolution, the football revolution.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Straight Shooting LJ, the G-Man and Jazzy Fizzle proudly bring to you another installment in the series, the interview series that goes into that deep, dark, seedy underbelly of football. Nah, I'm kidding. You know I'm kidding by now. But you know what? I am pleased, very pleased, to sit next to the director of Motiv8 Sports and Fitness. Also one of the Pitch Talk family as well. Mr. Samir Sawhney.
Thank you.
Samir, how goes it, man?
Very well, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad, man. Not bad.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Nah, man. It's going to be our pleasure. I can tell it. I can absolutely tell it. But what have you been up to? What have you been up to lately, man?
Well, we've just had the summer, so we've been working hard on our camps, soccer camps, multi-sport camps over in West London. We're obviously now moving into the autumn, and we're back in school, working hard in our schools in the same part of West London. My co-founder and very close friend Farhan, he's off abroad, setting up the next phase of our grand master plan.
World domination, yeah.
Yeah, one step at a time, one kick at a time. So he's off doing a few bits, and we're profile building. I think we've been doing that for the last 18 months, but this year it's sort of putting our bang where our buck is, as they say, and getting out there and showing the kids and our partners and all the guys and girls that are sort of backing us with their support, sort of, you know, how much that we value that and how we can show it through our hard work. So yeah, busy.
The beginning is where we always start. Do you agree? The most logical
It's the best place.
the most. We feel it's the most logical.
It's logical, so. Yeah.
But the first question: who is Samir Sawhney, and what does he stand for? What makes you tick?
Good question. Well, I'd say sport, which is probably the most obvious answer. That's it, good night. No, sports, being healthy and fit. I'm a family person. I have a huge belief that for me, sport was something that I could use to become a more confident and more rounded human being, and it helped me to be more, you know, positive in my life. And I've offered that back to my friends and family. And it's always been there niggling away at me since I was a boy, turning into a young man in my teens, then into an adult, had some time away, the usual uni and whatever. And then I came back to it in my 20s with a different impetus from a sort of, not failed, but someone who never really cut the, you know, mustard as a footballer, as a player. I found that I had this gift of being able to pass on a message via the medium of sports. But in terms of where I started, I guess it was just, you know, my mum tells me funny stories about how I'd be kicking oranges around the house when I was a kid. And the usual, smashing every pot that I could probably physically do. It's causing utter mayhem on a Sunday morning when mum and dad are trying to sleep. My sister's, you know, chilling out. I'm baby sister, not baby anymore. But, you know, so yeah, sport's always been there, be it watching, be it playing, be it talking. But I see myself as less of an armchair fan, more of a student of the game, you know. If a football game was on at 3 in the morning and I was up back in the day, yeah, I'd still be doing it. Less time for that now that I've got the suit tonight, but yeah, now that I've gone a bit more corporate. But yeah, I get a bit more tired. But yeah, certainly it was the hunger and determination to, maybe an obsessiveness that I'm built with, to absorb any aspect, and not just football, any sport, you know, be it ultimate frisbee or cricket or whatever it is, just to see how human beings can interact with each other and create something, be it win or lose. But that team ethic, and that stuck with me, and I use it a hell of a lot now with the young people, you know, explaining to them how team ethics works, because it was something that helped me so much.
Do you watch curling?
I do at the Winter Olympics.
It's a brick and a brush.
To be honest, I think we should take it up a bit more, because certainly in January it would be one way to get to work. You just strap them to your feet.
You use the big brick to get people out of the way. It's like having a snowplow.
See, you've got a new sport there. So there we go. Copyright it. Motiv8 will be involved.
I was going to ask actually. Do you have any role models that you look up to, whether it be in or out of football?
In football, it will be my family. My father, bless him, he passed away about 6-7 years ago. He worked incredibly hard in his life. He wasn't in sport. He was a sports fan, like most, you know, men of his time. But his thing for me was he instilled in me something which I think I've got later in my life. Not so much when I was younger, more in my sort of late 20s, early 30s, after he passed away, which was that whole ethic of be determined, don't let a wall that crops up. And I'm not talking about on racial lines, I'm not talking about on cultural lines. Just as a human being, don't limit yourself by what you can't do. The sky is the limit, which was his mentality. He was a successful man. He then had tough times and he became successful again. And he showed to me that one thing he always said to me was, son, you know what? I worked really hard in my life to get where I am. I want you to now build something for yourself, you know? And that to me outside of sport. In sport, I'd probably say, for me, individuals like Sebastian Coe or Steve Cram, purely because when I was a boy watching them run and the sort of thing that they had with each other, that reminds me of some of my journey to where I am now, when not everybody says that you can't do it, but people have questioned maybe your ability to get to the next level, and you've done it time and time again. In team sports, I'd probably say Michael Jordan is a massive motivating individual for me, just by the fact that the man just kept, you know, pushing the limits of what people thought were humanly possible for him. And the team that he was a part of as well at the Bulls, and then later on with the Dream Team and their successes. In football, I'd probably say, for me personally, individuals like, it sounds funny, but George Best, or in the 80s it would be Peter Beardsley and John Barnes, you know. I think I'm giving away who I support. But,
we're going to come into that.
Yeah, they were John Barnes for me personally, because being a chap of medium height, I was never blessed with the ability, when I played up front, to have the ball blasted up to me. I enjoyed the dribble and run factor, the old pass and move ethic. And I remember seeing John Barnes when I was a really young boy, and I just thought, you know what? That's what football's about. That ethic. And it was just one person that kicked. Beardsley for me, then as I got more into football as a boy, he was somebody else who I really looked at as a footballer, thinking, you know what? You don't look like a footballer. You look like someone I could meet in the street, the layman in the street. I could just have a chat with you. You're not, say, the glitzy Premier League footballer that we'll get now, who has like 100 bits of baggage with them. Those were the guys I looked up to, that the bread and butter was there. And you know they're grafted. The grafting element, if you look at all the people I looked up to and still do in one way or another, that was what really, really, you know, it keeps me driving as well, to say you constantly have to redevelop and redefine, but also never forget where you come from as well. That humbleness, but confidence, you know?
No, I hear that. No, I tell you. No,
that was a long answer.
No, hey, you know what? It's a good one. Hey,
I just thought of Beardsley. That's why it was something that crops my mind. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, Beardsley.
I mean, how did you get into football? And did you play in school?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, funnily enough, I didn't really have football in the schools that I went to. My schools in West London, my primary and then my secondary, weren't football playing schools. They were more your rugby orientated schools and cricket in the summer. So football was something that we tended to play in the playground, the usual jumpers for goalposts type thing. I remember one famous story where I was in sixth form actually at this point, and we had the whole of a year versus another year, and we had 100 kids in each year.
Oh my God.
It was literally every man in it for themselves. Foot brawl is what we called it. But it was that sort of stuff. That was like the old stuff. The stuff that I see now as a teacher and coach, but it's a different sort of thing now. Back then, it literally was raw. Yeah. The football was like falling apart. It wasn't a football. It was sometimes, we had apples. It was gigantic conkers. It was tennis balls with tape on them and stuff. It was all sorts. So certainly that. And then park football, playing with friends over in West London, again in Ealing and all over. And you know what? It was the most fantastic time because I'm an 80s child, and it was like, John Barnes taking on a few players. It was like that. You see it on the Saturday, Monday, straight in there. I'm going to take on 3 players and do a John Barnes instep on them. End of. But yeah, definitely a very, very happy time in my life playing football as a boy in school. Well, I say in school, not really team-based stuff, but certainly the park stuff and the playground stuff. Yeah, 100%.
I hear that. Now. Actually, oddly enough, there was a question from our co-host, the G-Man, about who initially inspired your interest in football, but you've kind of said Barnes and Beardsley.
I'd say so.
But what I want to ask next is, do you remember your first match?
My first match was actually playing for a local team that was affiliated with the school, my primary school, so that whilst they didn't have a fully fledged football team, it was like an amalgamated thing from a local Saturday team, but they called it my school's team, if that makes sense. It was like nowadays you'd call it a partnership, basically, like a football club coming in and doing community sessions. And I'll be honest, it was the most terrible game I'd ever, because I was about 9 at that point. Now kids they start playing like 4 and 5 for teams, but it was the 80s. We had time on our hands. There wasn't the pressure that was then. I scored an own goal for a start off a corner. And for some reason, I'll never work out why the coach put me on the back post, because I'm not blessed with height now, and I definitely wasn't blessed with height in 1989. Yeah, I jumped up. I was quite springy. And I jumped up. Remember, the ball came like an in-swinger, and I just jumped up. I don't know for what reason, thinking that I was Eusebio or Pele or a Sol Campbell old-school style header. I could nod it 50 yards down the line. And the neck muscles went, but the ball decided to go straight in the back of my own net. It was one of those ones. So it was memorable. The next game after that was a bit better, but the first game was not. It was memorable for all the wrong reasons. I spent more time on my backside than probably I did on my front. And I'm not a bad footballer. I'm going to be a little bit arrogant here. I am blessed. I was blessed with a little bit of talent. I know that, and I was told that often enough. But nonetheless, it was what I would class as a very humbling experience. Remembering, stick to the basics, and let the skill stuff happen when you're a little bit more established. Don't jump before you can walk. Don't walk before you can crawl. Don't crawl before you can look. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was doing. Swimming on ice. Yeah.
I love it. Those moments as a kid that will just always kind of.
I think if I had a counsellor at that point, then yes, it would certainly have been quite a long time spent on the couch. So what's the problem today? How long have you got?
So obviously your first match was a memorable experience. Do you remember your first pair of football boots? It's a question from the G-Man. What was your first set of boots?
A black pair of Adidas Copa Mundials, the classics. My mum, oh my days, I don't think I've ever harassed her for anything more. I just harassed her for Sabutio, for all the usual bits and bobs that a footballing nut does, your first kit, everything. But it was the Adidas. When I saw them at I can't even remember which tournament it was. I think it was the 88 Euros. Which, if I'm right, Holland might have won off the top of my head, although don't quote me on that. Yeah. And I remember I was one of the Dutch players wearing them, and I said, I need to find out. And obviously we didn't have the joys of Sky Plus and Google. Yeah. So I literally asked and asked and asked and asked and asked, and my dad went and asked, like my dad owned a few shops back in the day, and he literally went through all of his stuff, asking them every person. So do you know which boots? So and so. He didn't even know that much about football back then. It was me that was educating him. And yeah, the freshest pair of Adidas Copa Mundials you've ever seen. And
how long did you keep them fresh for?
2 years. Every time I looked after them. But then the inevitable happened when your eyes get turned by coloured football boots. Yeah, I was one of them. A marketer's dream. Yeah. But to be honest, I was a forward. So at that point, I think I just pretty much became a slave to the system.
I was actually going to ask you, what was your favourite position to play as a youngster?
Winger. On the right side of midfield. I guess you'd probably call it a playmaker now, to a certain extent, although that's not the right side, because I tended to drift in from the right and play behind the forwards and be occasionally, I guess they call them now, false number 9.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of injuries when I was playing at a young level, and I used to love just dribbling at players. But the wing was where I was most, because being a small chap, pace was something I needed to have. And I used to look at players later on as I got a bit older, like Mark Overmars, that sort of player, where I would just go bombing it just up and down like a machine.
Funny thing is actually, if you still playing as a winger now.
Well, I don't know if my knees would agree. I'm more of a, to be honest, I've done a rude hullet and I've started moving back as I've got older. So now it's five-a-side football, I'm the libero. Which basically means Sam's too tired to basically bomb it up and down the wing.
I'm just going to stay here.
I'm going to screen the defence, quote, end quote. Where's the defence? Oh, they've gone.
Because I was going to say, if you were to be on, if you were to somehow magically appear in the Glemnet SAL and you were playing on right mid, you'd end up against me at left back.
Then what I would probably do is feign injury and go off at half time. No, there's not. You know what though? I don't feign injury. I would get injured. Injuries are not. I went through the first phase of my life where I was fine, and then when I hit about 19, it was like I'd walked under one too many ladders or something. It was injury after injury after injury. But no, I'd probably say, if I had to choose a place now and I was still of the ability that I'd like, I'm not, I'd like to be able to probably go back and play on the wing, to be honest. I did enjoy that a lot, because you get so much on the ball and you have to do so much, not that any player doesn't, but you have to do so much communicating, and that second sort of ball, not ball, but you know, being able to just move around and not be caught out, not be caught ball watching, and not be caught, you know, just standing to attention.
Because you've got to help your fullback.
You're helping your fullback, potentially.
I'm always kind of like,
you're feeding the forwards, but you're also a very integral part of the midfield. The problem that you have in modern day football is that I think the old school winger, which I probably would class myself as, almost like a Stanley Matthews type player, they're being phased out to a certain extent for this, like I said, false number 9 or whatever, or, you know, having 4 or 5 midfielders across, and then they're constantly switching. That wasn't something I was particularly comfortable with, which was switching wings. Although I was predominantly right-footed, so the right wings, and I would cut inside. I didn't really enjoy it, I'll be honest with you. I didn't enjoy that aspect, because I thought, to a certain extent, sometimes it means that you're not, if you haven't got 2 players that are in synergy, you've got a serious problem if one of them's going over to the other side or you're drifting into the same positions.
So one of them was you'd be wanting to skin defenders, beat them, and deliver a ball in.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
That's a challenge.
Pretty much. Yeah, I don't know if I could do it now, but
we better get a pitch talk challenge at some point.
Yeah. I think the challenge would be, can I last the game? So we'll have to have a secondary challenge. Now, can you take on the challenge?
Nah, I hear that, man. I hear that. I was going to ask you, what was your first football kit? It kind of gives an answer away to a later question, but what was your first?
Liverpool's kit that they wore in the '88 Cup final they lost to Wimbledon.
Oh my God, that one.
That one. I still have that kit somewhere, actually. But it was a simultaneous one, because I remember buying my first England kit at the same time, which was the old classic red away.
Ah, yeah, that is a nice one.
I think it's Admiral.
Yeah, I was going to say the Admiral was a kit.
I don't have that one anymore, but I'm pretty sure it was Admiral. I love that top. That was like, you know, when family come around top.
Yeah.
Hey, look at me.
I had that with my first shirt as well. I was like, my mum tells me stories that, I used to try and wear it every day. No matter how it looked, if I had food down it, if it stunk, I would still want to wear it.
But that England kit was me, John Barnes, in the Maracana.
No.
Taking on the defence. I'd go in the garden and I'd be doing that. I'd have the plant pots out and like my mum's row of lovely flowers, and boom.
Just taking target practice.
Yeah. My mum's not going to be happy when she sees it. I've really made it look bad. To be fair, yeah, that was it. The Liverpool kit from '88, and then the England one.
In terms of me mentioning giving away the answer to a question, what team do you support?
Everton. No, Liverpool. He's not going to talk. Is that the interview finished now? You're like, no.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Liverpool for the next half an hour, so we're good. No, okay.
Liverpool. Although I have to say, as I've become older, I grew up supporting as a boy. My travels, my work. I'm a fan of football, full stop now, and it's made me into probably a much more, I'd say, considered fan. I'm able to take a step back that maybe as a boy that I found very difficult to do, which I think a lot of fans of all ages find hard sometimes, the tribalism aspect. I find that incredibly difficult to associate with. Like I said, I'm not somebody who, if the club has done X, Y, and Z, we know Liverpool's been in the papers a lot over the last few years for various reasons. I feel that I've become a bit more mature towards my attitude towards being an honest and open fan, but also towards my views towards other clubs, because of my passion towards what I'm trying to achieve through work, and it's filtered, and naturally it's filtered into my private life.
No.
But yeah, certainly if Liverpool go off and finally do decide to win another title, I'll be quite happy. Quietly confident.
Same here, actually. Yeah,
I'm not talking about this season, I'm just saying generally I'll be quietly confident, yeah. Fingers crossed.
I'd say, Moisey, what you got? Moisey, what you got? Is the chant that we've been regularly perpetuating on the shows. But yeah, it's a bit. Nah, I can understand that because it's one of them. Was football's kind of a part of the life, an integral part.
It's evolved for me. And my feeling is that I've evolved with the way I see football as well, from being just your regular fan who loves the sport to, like I said, the student who began to realise that it didn't stop and end with my football team. It was the league, then it was all leagues in England, then it was grassroots, then it was worldwide, and then it was what goes on in other parts of the world in terms of their how they love the game, how they view the game, how they, eat, sleep, and watch the game and talk about the game. Checks in the post for that one.
I like that. He's scripted ad-libs.
I almost messed that up. I forgot the last bit. There you go. Take two.
Question from our co-host, the G-Man. He says, quite a way you support Liverpool, obviously from being one of the Pitch Talk family on the shows. What I'd like to know is, out of these three players, who do you like the most and why? Robbie Fowler, Michael Owen, Luis Suarez.
For me, it was Michael Owen, because I associated my own ability to play football on the style that Owen was, which was the rapid pace, the quick touch, the ability to lose a player within seconds, but not be one of these footballers who was maybe blessed with the ability, like a Suarez, to put it through the legs, to be able to put through a killer pass. Theirs was about grafting, obviously all natural ability. For me, Robbie Fowler was the other side of that, which was he wasn't blessed with the pace, but what he could do with the ball was, I don't think it's been matched by a number 9, in a lot of ways since. Suarez, to me, I like the player, but this is maybe where my evolution as a fan has changed. Maybe if I was 15, 16 years old, I'd give you a different answer. But as someone in my 30s, Suarez's baggage that he brings, I can't disassociate that from the player anymore. You could say, well, so I've had conversations with people and they've asked me, well, Michael Owen left under a cloud. I said, he did leave under a cloud, but at the end of the day...
Forced out, really.
But at the end of the day, there are always reasons why a player leaves. I'm focusing on what I thought of the player when he was there, when he was injury-free. And I mean, I still remember the first goal he scored against Wimbledon, for example, and the way that
was a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw, and we were pushing for the title, I think, at that point.
At Selhurst Park.
If I'm right, Liverpool pushing for the title, and it was effectively over anyway, but that...
At Selhurst Park, I was actually there for that match.
And it was a lovely goal. It wasn't actually an electric pace goal. It was a dribbling goal with a little side foot, if my memory's right. But the thing for that is, with players like that, for me, it's the affinity that you have to that player. And I just thought, look, whatever people might think of him off the pitch, he just came across as a sort of chap that I could have played football with in the park. The sort of guy that you always meet when you're out and about and you say, yeah, why isn't he a footballer? Yeah. He's good. That was what I saw from Michael Owen. With Robbie Fowler, I'll always remember the 3-minute hat-trick against Arsenal. So that, to me, is the other side.
The G-Man's face off camera, his face was just like, if looks could kill, you'd be 12 foot under. He would have killed you 3 times.
Let me rephrase that. The 3-minute hat-trick, full stop.
3-minute warning.
But that's the sort of player.
End up cutting my mic off.
And that's a wrap. But yeah, that to me, Suarez is what I would call the modern version of those players, where he to me is someone that's been given a God-given ability to do what he does. What he can do, the ball manipulation skills that he can do are fantastic. But for me personally, I just find it very hard to compare him to the other two. So I'd say Owen shades it from Fowler for me because of my affinity to him. Suarez does come a little bit way back on the third.
Fan question
Sure.
from Big T, aka Thomas Hewitt. We've got to throw them T's up for him.
T unit.
Yeah, it's like being on the show. Throw them T's up.
Yeah.
But he asks, he's got quite a few questions today.
Okay.
As a Liverpool supporter, do you think that the current board will decide to increase Anfield Stadium capacity or move to an entirely new ground in the future? Now, obviously, there's been news recently in terms of kind of building up and the whole controversy with buying houses around the ground and then being empty. But do you think they're going to build up Anfield or they're going to move?
I think it's veering towards Anfield being having some sort of development of sorts. It's a tricky one because the example I'd use is I worked for Brentford FC Community Sports Trust for about 8.5, 9 years, and they've had a similar issue with regards to their ground, which I think they're on the process of moving from now to the Lionel Road facility. Yeah,
they're going to move there. I actually got a thing in the post about it recently.
Oh, obviously, because you live around there.
Yeah.
So I think it has similarities whereby, although Brentford are in the middle of West London and a very active part of West London, the area of Liverpool, where the ground is, where Anfield is, it always strikes me as a bit difficult to tell people whether or not houses are being lived in, that we're expanding a football club into an area, especially in the current climate where housing is an issue. And you've got effectively, and this is me taking my football cap off, you're taking social housing out to put a football ground in there. And people say, yes, it's going to generate jobs. Those arguments are used every time. Yeah. So for me, I don't know if a partial redevelopment is the way forward. It could be a short-term solution. When I say short-term, as in with a 5 to 10 year one, with a view to having a medium to long-term. But then it really comes down to how long this board is looking at owning the club for. Yeah. And I'm not saying that as a cynic. I'm saying that as a realist.
But you got to be, yeah.
You know, from what I've read, and I haven't got connections at Liverpool, so I can say this as a fan. I get the impression they'd rather move out and have a fresh start because it would have a new vibe. In other words, it would be their creation, whatever their sponsorship of the ground is, because that's inevitably what would happen. It would be called the X Stadium.
Yeah.
For me personally, obviously, I'd love to see Anfield redeveloped. I think it's just one of those things that where it sits, it's just in a bit of a difficult place because you've got Stanley Park, obviously, on the back of it. Yeah. You've got the housing on one side. So it really comes down to how much they can sell it to the local community. The problem is, because of all the false starts and the issues from the previous regime, I think what it comes down to, to say the least, I think what it definitely comes down to is that how they sell the stadium, if they do go through a redevelopment to the local community, and how the council view it, because at the end of the day, it does come down to what it's going to do for the community. Yes, it will get bums on seats, but I'm thinking of more than just the Liverpool fans. I'm talking about the wider community. It needs to be a larger community resource. Not that Liverpool are not a community club, but you know what I'm saying. I have a feeling eventually there could be a new ground. So I've fudged the answer a bit, but it's just a very difficult situation. I think the likelihood is there may be a redevelopment, because the problem is if Liverpool get a new ground, our friends over Stanley Park, Everton, have within their rights to ask for a new ground as well. Yeah. And then there comes the question about a ground share.
Yeah,
that's another story.
I don't think that will happen.
I probably won't,
personally.
But nonetheless, I cannot blame if the council turn around and say, well, why don't you ground share, because it's going to save a lot of hassle to everyone. So maybe the easier of the two solutions is to have the redevelopment. Then with the redevelopment, there are several issues as well, with the time lapse, the cost, the issues around when you're redeveloping a ground. It's not as simple as doing it on, like Football Manager. It's just a tier on over the summer.
No, exactly.
It is work. And Liverpool's ground is an old ground, so it's going to need a lot of structural work to make it capacitized and then what's the maximum capacity it can go up to?
But then I think even so, it also, I think another issue would be if the whole ground's getting redeveloped at once, or unless we go the Wolves route and
stage by stage.
do it in bits. Which I don't know if I see that happening, but at the end of the day, if we do it like, say, Fulham did, where it's a whole stand at once, who's gonna accommodate us for a season or two whilst that happens? Well, we had QPR and Fulham, but Liverpool Everton's a bit of a different animal.
They'll end up at Tranmere at this rate. Park's not the worst place in the world. But no, joking aside, it's the strangest situation because there is the issue with the previous regime and all the issues that happened there. So people can quite
bridges burn, isn't it?
Yeah, can confidently say, well, this is a new regime. They've been in for several years now. What's the delay? I think the delay genuinely was that the club was a complete mess, and the stadium redevelopment had to be put on the back burner while they stabilised the club. And it's pretty glaringly obvious that there were some really core issues within that club that are still being rectified even up until recently, if not now. And then there's the whole management side. The problem is you can't redevelop a ground when you're not sure where the football club is going as a 11 men on the pitch type thing. You don't know where your club stands. You don't know if they're going to be a Champions League side or if they're going to be a top 6 side who are going to be every other season qualifying, because that will affect how much money you can earn. That will affect the types of sponsors that are going to be brought in for either a new ground or redevelopment. So, and then obviously there was the 10 years of Roy Hodgson to Kenny Dalglish and now Brendan Rodgers. That's several managers within several years, which again means the club is going through instability.
Yeah.
For whose ever fault that was. That's still instability.
Severance pay, and you're having to pay out with that. You're having to pay to get someone in.
The club is not as financially powerful as, say, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago. But that's just the cruel nature of the Champions League and why it's a very, very dangerous thing to go chasing it, because when you're not in it, you can have these issues, which you are trying to make ends meet, which everyone is, but the ends are meeting a little bit easier than others. So
that's a good point. I mean, another question from Big T, aka Tom Hewitt, via email. Can you see Liverpool Football Club winning either the Barclays Premier League or qualifying for the UEFA Champions League within the next 5 years? So Big T's kind of putting you on the spot.
I'll answer the second question first. So definitely I can see them qualifying for the Champions League within the next half decade. I would qualify that answer as, I can see that if Brendan Rodgers is given the time that he's been allowed, he's realised he's made mistakes with transfers. He is working with the board. What I would say that their attitude towards the club is that they're going two-pronged. They won't spend more than maybe 15 to 18 million on any one player unless they're absolutely a Mesut Özil type player, like a one-off. Yeah. And they're trying to look for players that are either up and coming or have had a stutter in their career but still have a defined talent, like Philippe Coutinho is a great example of someone who...
Sturridge as well.
And Daniel Sturridge, great examples, you know, who maybe have had, for whatever reason, injury problems, their initial spark that brought them into professional football, it's not gone on to the next level. And Liverpool have thought, you know what, we can try and have a crack at that because the fee that we're paying is still of a market value, but not one where we're breaking the bank. Now, some could say, well, look at the Comolli regime and you got Suarez out of it. But then I would argue we got Suarez out of it, but we also overspent on several other players. But in terms of the Champions League, I veered off now. The Champions League, I would say, if the trajectory is such, I can see them qualifying within the next 2 to 3 years for the Champions League, certainly, because I would again qualify it by saying you look at the differences now in the Premier League to where it was a couple of years ago in terms of the leadership of clubs. You have within the current top 4, as in those who qualified for the Champions League, you have only Arsenal as the club that have retained a manager or a leader at the top. Manchester United now have a new leader on the pitch and in the boardroom. Manchester City obviously have a new manager, and Chelsea have a returning but still new. Whatever you want to say.
Chelsea have a new manager every year.
Yeah, and you have Tottenham who are going through what I would call almost like they've had to take one sideways step. I think this is what AVB wanted to do at Chelsea. Yeah. In other words, he wanted to have an international twice over for every position. But losing Gareth Bale for them, who was like their talismanic player they were building the team around, meant that their project, quote unquote, has had to maybe take a sidestep, which is why players like Soldado maybe have been brought in, and they're still a bit weak, I think, up front. If Soldado's gone, I can't really see who's going to score as many goals. I know Defoe is good, but I still can't see him taking.
He's more of a cup goal scorer for me.
Well, he's not playing a lot, let's be honest. He doesn't seem to be the preferred player. I'd say Liverpool certainly for that reason with those clubs, and then you've got a couple of others up and coming that are potentially knocking on the door. It could be the spur that they need because they're offering a little bit more consistency just because Rodgers has now been there for a while. In terms of winning the league, I would like to think they can do it within the next 5 years, but then I thought Benitez was going to do it over his period, and he came incredibly close.
Well,
you know, and
if it weren't for that draw at Stoke, who knows?
And they didn't have the best. They didn't have the best Christmas, I think, during that run-in as well. But that's I compare that to that, and I think it's too easy for me to say yes or no. I think it has to be based on what happens with their challenges for the Champions League, because when you win the league, and look at City and United last season, for example, and then City this previous season, luck is created. But sometimes it is something as simple as the fixtures, sometimes what they throw up, how they come up for you, and also how fortunate you are about your team staying away from injuries, and how it's not having sometimes a deep squad, it's about having a squad that you're able to generally keep away from the injury table, you know, and I've probably not answered that correctly, but what I mean is that sometimes you'll have a player who'll be injured for a couple of weeks and then come back and start banging in the goals. You've seen Suarez come back and he's taken a couple of games to embed himself back into it. If players like him stay positively disciplined, they're at the club, that's another story. And they keep developing the types of players that they look like doing, and they develop the youth through. I mean, Liverpool on a youth level alone are a very strong outfit.
Oh, yeah.
But they probably lack now, they've now gone through to the next phase of their development, they lack the experience of knowing what it's like to be in the top four.
But we did.
There's very few players left that actually have played Champions League football for that
For me,
club.
that's why Kolo Touré was such an important acquisition. A lot of people, oh, he's past it, but he's not being brought in for that. He's being brought in for his experience. You've got Daniel Agger next to him.
And now they've got about
Touré and Agger, I love that. And then you got, as I like to call him, backcrack and Sacco. You've got him coming in as well.
We've got about 400 defenders at the club now, so there's no excuses.
I don't mind that. Speaking as a left back, I don't mind that. I prefer to have a solid base build on that.
I'd say Liverpool lack probably a striker who can take the slack if Sturridge is out. Sturridge has done what I thought he would do at City actually before he left. Which was he looked like he was going to be that sort of for Chelsea.
I don't think he should have went to Chelsea.
I think he realised that.
$10 million deal when it happened, it was like, really? I was like, that's a bit early, isn't it?
We definitely do. I mean, I'd say Liverpool definitely need another forward. If it comes through the youth team, fantastic. Like, you've got Jordan Ebay, you've got your Adam Morgans. I would love to see one of those boys come through.
I'd love to see Morgan get a chance.
But then I'm one of those people who also realises that you cannot build your team around unexperienced youth players. Now, I could say, well, that's the Alan Hansen, you can't win anything.
I was going to say, I thought you were going down that road.
You need a blend. You need a blend. You need the players, like we were just talking about, players who come through. You still need those who are, they may not be playing week in, week out, but you like the Kolo Tourés who can experience them through. You can definitely win things with kids, but what you need is the structure around them. And I think Liverpool is still developing that structure. The players coming in, Brendan Rodgers is to a certain extent changing his coaching philosophy. I think the way coach he was at Swansea is not the coach he is at Liverpool, because the players he had at Swansea, he gave them a different reason for fighting for that badge. At Liverpool, it's the ethos that goes with the club. Like if you're a Manchester United player, you have the element of replicating the Busby Babes, and now Ferguson's era. You know, you have, for example, a club like Chelsea now who've had a long level of success over this last decade. How they've done it is how they've done it is one way. But the fact is, Mourinho's come back now to try and explain to them that I'm a different coach, but I'm a winner, and I've got to try and now develop this broken dressing room, which I believe it is and has been for a long time, and try and bring out the weak from the chaff and develop some young players as well. I genuinely believe he has to now, no matter what he says. But going back to Liverpool, I'd say Champions League, I'm quietly confident they'll do it within the next couple of years. But, and it's a big but, with the league title, it comes down to how, well, if the manager stays, because if we have another bad season, what happens then? And how he's backed. And I don't mean financially, I mean emotionally, psychologically, and in terms of his staffing. Can he bring in even more talent and develop what he has behind the scenes to make them into a world-class team that manages the team? Because that's important. You can't win a trophy without the right people who are actually creating those winners. So yeah, it's a big one.
Football in the community and Motiv8 SF. That's what we're here for. It's our next segment, Football in the Community and Motiv8 SF. You're a community development and grassroots specialist, but what we'd like to know is, what do those two roles, or that role, if it's kind of one amalgamated role, what does that entail?
Well, the community development side is about being able to create projects in what we'd call doorstep
areas. So when I was working in community sport, sort of initially, which was about 10 years ago now. Yeah, 10 years ago this year. I found that a lot of the work that I was doing, and it was of no disrespect to any of the organisations or projects, quite a lot of the time the kids found it very difficult, especially in the current climate, financially or travel-wise, to get from A to B. So when I left to start Motiv8 in 2012 really, 2011.
We'll ask you how we're going to ask.
I've jumped ahead. I started thinking about what was really important, and I put myself into the eyes of the client. The child is the client, whatever anyone says. Our coaches are our clients as well, but children definitely at the centre of everything. Child-centric teaching. And one thing was being able to go onto estates or community areas of quite diverse community and demographic populations, and being able to say, you know, if you have an estate and you have a grass patch, or you have an estate and you have a cage where children are playing basketball, and I think, can we set up a project there? It could be something similar as working with a local sports centre for a partnership, working with the local authority, and then they allow us to then go off and do stuff. At the moment, what we'd probably say with community development, a lot of ours is working with primary high schools, which we're doing curriculum, sort of school time stuff as well within the school day, but also doing stuff on the weekends to then add a little bit more. And that's where the grassroots kicks in as well, because it's about developing players into what I would call a more holistic way of making them enjoy and learn. The talent ID is a separate thing. It's all about mass participation and about getting young people from different backgrounds and faiths and belief systems to work together, which is what I was talking about earlier with regards to how I see sport as a whole, why I do it, why I love it, the team ethic. Yeah. You're one. Sport to me can bring that. It brings out healthy living in people, but it also brings out other things, which are the ability to communicate well, the ability to have self-belief in yourself and those around you, the ability to bring people up when they're down, the ability to be brought up when you're down. Community development and grassroots can do that.
Would you say leadership? Would you say leadership as a quality?
Leadership in different ways. Leadership as the role model, leadership as the communicator to pass on a message, which is what I think lacks sometimes in society. A very much of, you know, it's not my problem, gov type thing. There's a piece of rubbish on the floor. It's not my problem. I didn't do it. I think sport can change that in people, because it can show you that every action has a consequence, and there's nothing wrong with you picking up the slack for someone as long as you remind them that I'm there to help you. I expect it back. It's a two-way street. You're not doing it for that reason, but that is what comes from it. And mass participation, as I said, is massively important, because we have a country we have a country which has a health issue. You know, childhood obesity rates are very high in London. They are higher than in, I think, most of the country. The biggest issue is because people are either citing they cannot afford, they do not have the time, or they do not have the ability to send their children to programs. So if we can put those programs closer to them and work with them, i.e. building a community development program would have a steering group, which is effectively a handful of people who have a buy-in. It could be a residents association involved, the local authority, safer neighbourhood teams, the local primary care trust, a funder, private funder, or a philanthropist if they're involved as well. It could be just a private individual, a citizen, local citizens' advice, anyone that we can then extrapolate the program out to in terms of exit pathways. So be it employability skills for those aged 16 plus and volunteering, and not just in sport. It could be, again, the leadership stuff which they can put on their CV, and then we can help them develop themselves to become part of mainstream society. For the kids, it could be helping them to tackle those obesity issues, tackle confidence issues. With regards to policing, helping reduce things like antisocial behaviour, and further than that, going down the woods of gang activity. So in other words, offering targeted work with children maybe who are in youth offending and we're trying to rehabilitate, or also just generally offering children who maybe have struggled, have not been involved with criminality, but are on the peripheral, so standing on street corners, you've got the antisocial behaviour, but you've also got targeted work at certain times to minimise young people just standing on street corners and being accused of being antisocial. We know that 99.9% of children are not involved in any form of criminality. The problem is that there are swathes of young people who feel, for whatever reason, that they are not being heard or they don't have somewhere to go. It's too easy to say go off and do something if they're being brought up or they're in environments which, and when I say brought up, I don't mean by mum or dad on their own. A lot of it is peer parenting from other people around them who may not have the skills that maybe we had. They're savvy in a lot of ways, but in some ways, confidence is an issue. So yeah, so that's where we're at with regards to what we do. We try not to be a jack of all trades because I think that's unfair, but we certainly have to realize we have to be a multifaceted, multi-agency approach, and even things like sexual health for the older targeted groups, and being a portal and using sport as the medium to be that portal to get young people in to do workshops, like we're going to hopefully do some stuff for Black History Month. Stuff like that, you know, Diwali, all the community things that come up, we want kids to be involved in it because you know what? Like I said, 99.9% of them want to do it. Sometimes it's just fear of not being able to. And if they're doing something within a community development program, they also have a bit more respect from where they're from. And they don't treat it like it's just a gigantic bin site. Then they're actually going to be proud of where they're from because they can say, you know what, I'm a part of that. That's my ends. That's where I'm from. And I'm wearing a t-shirt, a Motiv8 t-shirt, maybe with my resident association logo or a partner logo, and they feel they've got a bit of ownership. So we like to make young people believe that they're very, very, very important, not just as a numbers game, because I don't think that's right. It's about them also feeding back to us and saying, we want this, we want that. And we'll try and give them everything that we can within our remit and within our limit.
How important do you think it is to rekindle that sort of community spirit, and also give youngsters something, also in terms of giving youngsters something to do, something constructive to do, not just giving them something to do for 10 minutes, but giving them something to do that they can maybe develop into a career? How important do you think that is, especially with your work with Motiv8 as well, trying to make youngsters better human beings? How important do you think?
It's a good question. It's essential. The biggest issue that I see, not just in this country, but in any country that I've visited, read about, or talked about, but speaking about this country, is the amount of inconsistency that there is towards the support that's offered to programs that are in or outside of sport, i.e. any program that is linked to youth provision. Generally, when you go for funding, so back in the day when I was writing a lot of funding bids, I've done up to £250,000 worth in one way or another in my career. The best you could probably hope for is a year to year. When you get larger scale programs, you'll get a few years, but they're normally with a caveat. In other words, understandably, they need to check. I believe there's been a lot of wastage. There's been a lot of programs which have not been necessary. There's been a lot of wastage in the amount of money that was thrown at programs towards the height of the recession in 2008. And then there were massive swathing cuts. And unfortunately, when there are cuts, there are the 2 or 3 areas that are hit, normally the arts, crafts, sport, and education, which probably is the umbrella for all of that anyway. And health, obviously, is a fourth one as well, to a certain extent. Things that people believe can be done on a lesser budget. The problem that you have is when you cut a program, say a connections program, or you cut, say, a music program or a media program, and you don't replace it with anything, or you offer an alternative which is not a viable alternative. In other words, you can't do it in the London borough of Hackney, you can go to Bromley. What you've effectively told young people is, it's not important enough. And when you have disenfranchised young people who don't understand how a system is fundamentally working, you therefore have alienated them from mainstream society. Now you can say, yes, but they can access information, they can talk to people, they can find out more about why this has gone wrong. It's a very difficult, look, every decision is difficult. It's difficult to decide when you haven't got any confidence in yourself that you need to get up in the morning because you haven't got any confidence to get up, and you need to go job hunting because you're so stressed out and you don't know, and you may have a peer group that are doing exactly the same thing. You don't have an individual to pull you out. Programs are needed like that for those young people, as you said, not just in the summer, but year-round, unbroken. And then having summer or holiday activity, which then offers them during curriculum time, which is not there, daytime activity. Some people call it diversionary activity. I don't like to use that term, but effectively that is what it is. It's giving them an outlet to do something positive. Positive. See, this is where I get a bugbear. We have a market saturation in this country with soccer schools and soccer academies and everything, soccer this, soccer that. you could point at us and say, Motiv8 Sports and Fitness, you're another one. What's so USP about you? What's the unique selling point? I say we're not here to sell anything. We're here to change things, and that's why we're taking our time. Some people have said to me, well, that's quite a big, that's a big term from people who've got not a lot to show for it right now. I say, listen, what little that we are doing, and we're not doing a little, we're doing a fair amount, we will change things in our own way, where we can go according to our remit and resources. My thing is that I need to talk to people, and that's where the situation is lost. Not enough organisations either talk to people, or their funders, or the governments, or local authorities are actually really conversing, and this is why people are turning away from politics in swathes, because they don't fundamentally believe that their voices are being heard. Now, you could say, this is old hat, this has been heard before, when are we ever going to change? You have to get in the system. Listen, you can only get in the system when there are individuals who are willing to stop. For example, you've got Question Time. I don't mean Question Time on a Thursday night on the BBC, I mean Question Time on a Wednesday that you see. I've had young people that I've taken previously to those, and they've sat there laughing their heads off with their mouths hitting the floor saying, this is how adults act, these are how the people in our country act, booing and hissing at each other. And then at the same time, I'm telling them, when I take them to a football ground, you're not allowed to act like a hooligan. Yet the people who run this country act like that, like they're overgrown school children. Yeah. And that
to me, the House of Lords looks like a drunken rabble.
Well, my point being that, going back to what you said, the necessitation is actually of these programs, to me, is countered by the necessitation of people at the top to understand that there are people like ourselves who are working in grassroots. And yes, the FA is, for example, 150 years old this year. That's fine. And there were 150 people who were given fantastic awards, which is fantastic. But I would like to see 150 days of activity rather than one day. I want to see the government and other organisations being given rewards once a day for 150 days. Why can't you give out 150 programs, 150 grants? It's not a lot. You could give a grand out easily to each organisation that people in communities could vote for. You see the private organisations do it. You've seen newspapers do it. You've seen television channels do it as well, where they'll have grassroots programs. And then there's things like the Premier League. You look at the Bundesliga and the way that money from that organisation is filtered down, transfers, money is filtered down via transfers to regional. I don't see why the Premier League, and it's been said before, and I'll say, why they aren't pumping in cash towards the bottom. And not just grassroots sport. I've worked on Kicks. Yeah. Good programme. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about programs that are not just sports orientated. Sport is just one facet. Not every child is going to want to go on and play sport until they're 50, 60, 70. It will be there because they have to do it, and it's a positive thing that's part of their lifestyle upbringing. Music, fantastic. I'm a big music fan. I think it's the food of the soul. Yeah. I think more people need to be doing music. I think there's a lot of anger in society. Music is a good way to counter it. Let people talk, flowetry, let people talk out their anger. Yeah. But without consistent 50-week-a-year, you need 2 weeks off for Christmas. 50-week-a-year programs, that it just can't work. And this, like you said, a program gets moved around. All you're doing is you're showing to young people, we don't really care enough about you to be able to do it. Or someone with a suit hasn't come down and actually come and watch that program and see how important it is. Yeah. I spent a long time in my previous job always asking people to come to my programs. It happened occasionally. I'm not going to judge them on it. People are busy. But I don't feel they fully grasped what we were trying to achieve. Yeah. So I had to do it myself. That meant going to Residents Association meetings at 8, 9 o'clock, listening to people talking about things that maybe weren't necessarily linked to what I was maybe selling. I don't like to use that word because I just told you before, but what I was offering. But that, to me, was what won funding, or won partners, which then we could use that, because you have to listen to what people want. And then you have to have a discussion with them. There's not enough people having a discussion. So until that changes, we are going to have problems. Until people actually at the top sit down and actually come out. And coming out once when the cameras are there is not enough. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of good people doing a lot of good work behind the scenes, but there needs to be more of it on a consistent basis.
There are a lot of people who like to kind of shoot their mouths off.
It's very easy to criticise.
And especially in football, there are a lot of people within the game
I know
who really get my goat and really make my blood boil in terms of talking smack at certain times. Yeah. And it's like, dude, why didn't you say that before? Why have you waited only until now to jump on a bandwagon?
But I also know, Liam, of several footballers who would not want to be named, who are doing so much community work, because they do not want that name of theirs. Whilst they've had to have a sort of a payoff, they know if they go, they will be, to some extent, maybe criticised or bring the wrong type of PR and media with them. Yeah. They'd rather just go there blind, if you know what I mean, without all of that, and just do something for those communities that they're working with, either here or abroad. So I'm giving one perspective. There is a lot of good work going on, but the problem is when it comes from the top to bottom, it's not. There's just a disconnect, and that disconnect has to change. It has to, especially in the current climate where money is tighter than it's ever been before, and people are constantly, when I'm writing funding bids now, people are constantly telling me, where's your multi-agency partnership? Where is your value for money? My argument is I can offer you that, that's cool. But 10 years ago, the wastage was there, and now the problem is we've lost a lot of good projects on the back of a lot of bad projects either being funded or a lot of market-saturated organisations, like I said, lots of soccer schools, who are just there to make money out of people.
Yeah, no, of
and
course.
The quality is terrible.
And,
they're not doing anything for the community. And they're not conversing. Just because you've got a couple of people saying it's a good programme means nothing. I want to see kids. I want to see videos. I want to see it going viral. I want to see, and the other thing is, I want to see sharing of knowledge. That doesn't help. You get one project over in that part of town, that one there, and they don't communicate. You know why? Because they're so frightened that they're going to lose funding if they talk, or they've been bred to believe it's all out.
Dog-eat-dog
dog.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. It's very wrong. We need to work together. The whole point of community cohesion, what does the word cohesion mean? Exactly. So if you've got projects that are fighting like dogs for a bit of funding, what does that say? You're sending the projects the wrong example, so how can the kids learn anything?
You know what, yeah, speaking of cohesion and basically getting communities back together, how did Motiv8 Sports and Fitness start?
Well, I came to the end of my time at Brentford FC Community Sports Trust 14th of October 2011, so
you remember
almost
the day.
2 years ago.
The day. We're going to ask you a little bit. But.
I took some time out, and it had been in my mind for a while anyway. And it was just, I just thought, you know what? I've done everything. I've done everything that I can do for one organisation, and maybe now it's time for me to. I needed to just have a think, and I had a couple of months off, and I just got studying again. I was watching sport like more than ever because I had the time, and I started going out and just generally chatting to friends and people that I'd not connected with for a while. That's what work does to you, you know. It makes you busy. And it just came into my head, like one night, I was having a coffee with a friend and I just sat there and thought, you know what, I can't believe I haven't thought of this. I need to set something up. I need to do what I've been moaning about. I must say moaning as in, I need to do something that gives me a bit more of a challenge in my life. Yeah. And community development and grassroots was what sprang to mind. Because I was watching a park football match the day before I had this coffee, and these kids, at the end of it, I heard them saying to their coach, we haven't got anything to do, coach, now. Like, it was like a 1 o'clock, they'd done a training session, they had nothing to do. The coach, for whatever reason, I don't think could afford to get them to play matches. And I thought, you know what, that's so sad. Because kids were so, it's not about talent, there was like 30 kids in a park, and they were loving it, smiles on their faces, and they were aged from like 7 till 14. So this coach I had so much respect for, because the ages were totally like, if you had someone assessing him, not that you should, they'd be like, why have you got 7s with 14? That wasn't the point, it was a community program. They were just engaging. Some of the 14-year-olds were sports leaders, I could see. They were helping with managing some of the kids. It was a proper, what I would call a school of football. And I thought, you know what, I need to do something like that. But I need to do something which I can get people involved in. And you could say, well, that's not a particularly new idea. But then my argument is, why does a unique selling point have to be reinventing the wheel? Why can't it not just be that I'm a talented individual who has got 10 years, well, at the time, 8 years experience behind me. I understand how to communicate with people. I know a fair amount about coaching and other sports as well. I think I know what makes young people tick. I think I can also communicate with them on their level, but I can also sit in the boardroom and do your whole KPIs, key performance indicator reports. I can do the funding bids. I can, you know, get people of that corporate world involved, but I can also get my tracksuit on the pitch, and I can get the kids enthused and motivated and understanding that they are important. And then, you know, my now co-founder and one of my closest friends, we spoke about it over the Christmas period, and we thought, you know what, let's do this. And we had nothing. We had nothing but a concept. We had nothing but the money in our wallets, which wasn't a lot, and we just gave out freebies. We just gave out tasters to get a concept. We had to build a concept. Then the concept started building, which was, we believed in the community development, but we needed to work out where we stood. So we just met people. We gave out free sessions to schools, to young people, whatever. And then we started meeting people and talking to them, saying, this is who we are. With none of the fancy tracksuits, anything. It was just us in our jeans and tees, going out, being the guys that we are, a bit chatty, a bit enthusiastic, and getting hammered by a few people and saying, it's been done before, get out, whatever. Yeah, we'll help you, then never hear from them again. The usual. But it's made us hungry and determined. And, you know, like 18 months on now, the concept that we have is we are developing human beings first, players second. And that's the most important aspect of everything.
Oh, I hear that. I hear that. It just reminds me of a song by Brian May. Driven by you. Everything I do is driven by you. It seems that you're that way with the youngsters. Like everything we do at Motiv8
it's the best kind of addiction is that you can't let the kids down. But it's also important enough that we don't get obsessed in a way that too obsessed with what we're trying to achieve, if that makes sense, because obsession can also blind you. We're addicted to wanting children to be positive, but we realize we're not perfect. But we strive for perfection knowing we can never be perfect. And that's what I tell the kids as well. You have to strive to be the best, but realize the best is only how you feel about yourself when you look in the mirror in the morning. And that's what I'm talking about, building a human being. This whole concept of, I was reading an article the other day about, from an unnamed soccer association, not in this country, and on it was shocking. One of the things was talking about winning, and it said you win at all costs. And I just sat there and I thought, I'm so glad I'm doing what I do. One day I'm going to try and meet those guys, and I'm going to have a serious chat with them and say, can you explain this to me? Because as far as I'm concerned, and that was like for an under 14 organisation, an umbrella organisation.
Fun, not that kind of selfish mentality.
I personally think learning comes through fun. That's the only thing I can say. It comes through fun.
In one, oddly enough, we've had a question via email from Russ Vernon, one of the Pitch Talk family, via email. He says, hi Samir, what made you get involved in Motiv8 Sports and Fitness, which obviously you've been over, and do you enjoy the work that you're doing at the moment, and what's your plans for the future? The future thing we'll come into later on, but this one then was, are you enjoying it?
I think I've said it there. I love what I do. It's bloody hard work, I'll be honest. I've got my day job. I mean, don't think that we were able to just start something and we're suddenly like, you know, we're doing fantastic. We had to be very humble about what we did. I've gone back into teaching because I've got bills to pay, but it's given me the opportunity as well to practice a lot of what I preach, you know, with kids every day. But I love it. It motivates me because I have a dream. I have a passion for changing things piece by piece. I'm very determined in the sense that I realized that when my playing career wasn't going to happen, I mentally needed to take some time away, which is when university happened. And when I got into coaching properly and teaching, and now Motiv8 several years later, I realized I'd finally, in my 30s now, it had taken me until I was 31, 33 now, to find my place in life. And my place in life is Motiv8. And Motiv8 for me, in terms of future, we want to create an organisation that has fantastic role models as coaches and teachers on both sides of the spectrum, male and female. We're really, really intensely trying to develop a female structure to our project, having female coaches who we're actively looking for now. So obviously if people see this and are interested, they don't even have to be qualified. No, they don't.
We'll have the details going along.
They don't have to be looking for that section, because as far as I'm concerned, that's an area that we definitely feel with our mentoring abilities and my experiences in that we can develop females or males who want to work in that sector to do that. It's a very undervalued sector. But you have the women's football, but you know, it is still
We're gonna ask
undervalued.
you about it.
That side, female stuff. We're going international. I can't say too much because I'll be honest, we haven't really formalised anything. But certainly, in terms of the community development, we are moving along the lines of having, we'll always have our UK hub. We're English. We love this country. It's given us what we want, you know, in our lives. The ability to do jobs we love and to have beautiful families and work with fantastic young people every day. We want to take that concept abroad. We want to work with children. I mean, I have friends at the moment who are working out in some war-torn parts of Africa and the Middle East and have been using our concepts to practice and work with former child soldiers, children who've unfortunately been involved in the sex trade and have been brought back to mainstream society, but they need what we would call positive reprogramming. Sport is a great way to do that. So we're looking along those lines as well. So that's why we see ourselves as so much more than just a bunch of guys who like sport. We really believe in what we're doing. And like I said, that whole suit in the boardroom to tracksuit on the pitch mentality is something that we believe that we have, that it is arrogant. We don't think as many other people have that. I'm not comparing myself, it's just what I've seen. It's based on what I've seen. I haven't seen that many people who can do what we can do, but that means, for me, it's a challenge because I want to make more people do what I can do. As I told you, it's all about sharing my knowledge. If tomorrow someone tells me they want to become like I am, I say, I'm not even 10% where I need to be in my life. I want to have projects all over the world one day, hopefully. But that might change 5 years down the line. I might say, you know what, the ones we're doing, we're making some fantastic changes. We want to have a school. Certainly it could be in the UK or abroad. We want to have an educational free school. That's going to take a lot of work. That's a little thing that we're trying to work on. We're certainly looking at something like that potentially in India one day, which is to have a school and we'll have a sports program attached to it. But those are long-term plans. They may or may not happen based on what happens in the short to medium term. They're more plans of things that I want to do as a person. I want to do it for my father because it's a way for me to continue his name beyond my own human self, to do something for him, to say, you brought me into this world, I'm going to now do this for other children because of you, because of the things you did for me. But certainly in terms of Motiv8, I always say on Facebook and Twitter, we're only just getting started. This is first gear as far as we're concerned. But we have to do things sensibly and correctly because we are living in a world where, unfortunately, finance is not easy, and I'm being honest here. So we can't afford to take, but as far as I'm concerned, I cannot afford to set up a program and then 6 months down the line tell those young people, sorry, we've run out of money, see you later. I wouldn't do it.
I mean, you know what, I want to ask you actually, would you say that your work building Motiv8 Sports and Fitness has helped you develop as a person? I know you just mentioned about honouring your father's memory. Would you say
I'd say it has. I'd say it's made me into a more patient person. It has, because you have to be. You're a business owner, you know. You have to be. And as a role model, I've become much more aware of how I act. I'm a good lad, but how I act and the way I am, it's even more important now, more than ever in my life. You know, I'm married. I have a lovely family. I'm not a father yet. Hope to be, you know, at some point soon. Those things are things that have become more important to me because I've spent the majority of my career working with young people. But as you become a more mature man, you tend to start, or human being as much, you tend to start thinking of where your place is in the world. And I was telling you that I'd found my place. I don't think I still fully have, but I think I'm happy where I'm at. And I'm at a stage on the rainbow, you know, where I haven't got to the end of it, but I like the journey that I'm on. And Motiv8 is part of that journey. And I'm not willing to let go of it. If someone tomorrow said, we'll give you X million, I'd say, you're seriously asking me the wrong question here. You need to put that money into what we're doing, not into buying our brand. Because the brand, as far as I'm concerned, is, as I said to you before, it's a medium. It's a worthless piece of cloth that we're just using to become priceless for the children.
So it's the concept that's
the
important,
concept
not
more important.
Not necessarily.
Do clothes make the man, or does the man make the clothes? As far as I'm concerned, when we started Motiv8, we were wearing, like I said, we would go to meetings in jeans and t-shirts because that's the way we are. We're the jeans and t-shirts brigade. But we would coach wearing our own personal tracksuits and stuff like that. When the Motiv8 brand, when we started becoming a bit more corporate, you have to be a little bit, you know, you have to show people that when they're putting things in, we're bona fide and we're hard-working guys and professional. We then had to be a little bit more sensible. In the long term, we want an army of those guys, but good guys. When I say an army, a small army, we want a family. Like Pitch Talk have their family that we're proud to be a part of. We call all our coaches part of our family. I've spent time late at night getting phone calls from my team when they've been having personal issues, because I never had that in my career. I did, but not in a formalized way. That's what I mean. I had friends, I had colleagues, I had confidants. I've done it for my guys and girls. I've done it for them because I just think if I'm doing that for them, they will then go on and do it for the young people during their the time that they.
You said with knowledge sharing is kind of passing on that empathetic streak.
That bespoke mentality is something that's really important to me, the hands-on approach. And I hope to do that as the company grows and the organisation grows. I can still find a way to do it. I have a huge thing for helping people. A lot of people have told me over the years that there's not enough people that help. I think there are. I just think sometimes they don't know how to help. Being empathetic and understanding a person's problems is not hard. It's offering solutions, and where people get frightened. I tend to ask people when they have a problem. This is where I think Motiv8's going down, where we become. We're a self-help organisation.
Kind of like a mentor. Kind of
we're developing a mentor program, for example. But I always tell my coaches or players, I say, before you tell me the problem, do you have any answers that we can work on? Because if I just give them the answer, as far as I'm concerned, I've not really helped them.
You don't learn the solution and how to get there just in case it happens again.
Let's be honest, 9 times out of 10, we do know the answer to a lot of our problems. But it's just through fear or confusion. And we need another individual maybe to extrapolate some of the key points to assist us. That's where I think Motiv8's going down. We're becoming more than just an organisation that develops young people through sport. We're becoming an organisation who can affect change for the whole of your life, not just an aspect of your life.
So you mentioned about being a teacher. You're a PE teacher in
over in West London, over in Drayton Green in West London, West Ealing.
And you have a degree in business as well?
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's right. Unfortunately.
I say unfortunately because it's not. Well, it's done me all right being a business owner now. But
well, would you say both of those things help you with the Motiv8 work in terms of setting up the projects?
Certainly. It's given me the aspect that I needed. I made a conscious decision not to study sport. The reason why that was because I felt that, I don't know, rightly or wrongly, I wanted to do all of my learning in the real world with sport. I didn't want to spend 3 years sitting in lecture halls being told about sports science. That just wasn't for me. Yeah. I felt I had knowledge and a concept. I have notebooks at home, probably that would go from up to here, up to us both standing up tall. Yeah. Because I would just make notes, like doodles. I call them doodle books. And they're the things that have helped me with my concepts since like lesson plans and session plans, before I even knew what coaching was about. Yeah. You know? That was my studying. In terms of how Motiv8 was built with regards to my experience, definitely the teaching helps because I'm seeing kids every day, so I have fantastic different ways to obviously practice elements of what I'm doing, communication styles, mentoring styles, sports leadership styles, exit pathway styles. With business, families in business, a lot of them are entrepreneurs anyway, self-employed guys and girls, and certainly my studies. But I personally believe the textbook can only teach you so much. It's what happens in the real world where the reality sets in. You have those books, personal training for dummies and website building for dummies. That's what sometimes I think is exactly how I see a lot of my own personal education, that it got me to a certain level and made people take me seriously because I've passed X GCSEs, X A levels, gone to uni. But now it's all about me. That's just 1% now. Now it's putting it into practice and actually using it. And there's no one route to success. For me, certainly, the business experience that I have, is pretty much all of it has been on the job, as they say. It's been very, very, very much a case of shooting and seeing what happens. Yeah. You know, a bit like a football training session and having a shooting practice. The ball is coming in, you're making mistakes, and then as the technique improves, your confidence improves. And sometimes you'll go back to a training session and things will go back to square one. So you have to assimilate, have a think, and yeah. Practice makes perfect. All my experience, I genuinely believe, has come from outside of the classroom. But from what I've learned from inside of the classroom is how to be a positive student, how to take on board positive criticism, how to self-analyze, and how to accept that no 2 days are ever going to be the same. And you're never, ever going to get perfection, like I said before, with regards to myself and the kids and the coaches that I'm developing. I also have to believe that in myself and the business. We're going to have a great day and then a rubbish day the next day, but it's how you come back. You come back stronger from each adversity.
I mean, you've mentioned quite a lot in terms of experience. I mean, obviously your experience includes a decade of community delivery, mentoring and leadership in Ealing, Hounslow and Richmond. I want to ask you, firstly, during those years, what sort of projects were you a part of? And secondly, obviously you've mentioned you were a football and a community volunteer for Brentford FC for a while. How long were you there for, and what did you do to get there?
Okay, I'd probably better to answer that one first because that'll lead into the projects. So I started there in 2003 as a volunteer. A friend of mine, I was a personal trainer at the time, and a colleague and friend and a client, actually, three of them, were all doing a few bits. One specifically was actually at what was the Football in the Community program. Now, he said, listen, you love your football, come down, get involved. I was like, at the time I was a bit like, not sure about that.
Yeah.
You know, the usual, I was like, I'm not sure about being put on an estate. It's not really my sort of thing. I'll be honest, I was deeply cynical about it. I just thought it was like, you take a bag of balls and just get kids to bang them about. I was like, do I seriously need that? I'm a personal trainer, I don't need that. But you know what, I thought something in me niggled. He left it with me, and I came back to him and said, all right, listen, I'll come down, I've got an evening free, I'll come down. So he gave me the telephone number for what was the community department that based at the ground at the time. And I just got involved. I was sent to a session in Southall. And although I'm Asian, British Asian Sikh by background, Southall wasn't a place that I particularly went to a huge amount, not for any reason, just because I just lived on the other side of Ealing, and it just happened to be you'd go to Southall for maybe events, the odd meal, for Diwali to get your bits and pieces, or for other religious bits and pieces, or wedding stuff, you know, the usual, just pop in and out type thing. Yeah. It was quite eye-opening. We had 80 kids turn up for this session, 3 coaches, 2 volunteers, including myself. Police got called out. It was just insanity. I was like, this is not what coaching's about. Yeah. But it was just because back in that point, they were very successful, and they were getting a lot of kids to come to this funded program. It was Positive Futures over in Southall, which is backed by the Home Office. But I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to come back to this. It was a chaos, but it was organised chaos. There were just too many they just hadn't done their planning right. It happens. It happens to me and Motiv8.
Sounds like pitch talk, organised mayhem. on a Monday, organised mayhem.
There you go. That's got to be an oxymoron.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, I went back, and it was more structured. Obviously, the coaches had gone back. They'd reported back. They had a bigger team. They'd structured the time better. And it was brilliant. It was a really good session. And I got the bit. I got involved with some of the kids, got talking to them. They asked me a bit about myself. And pretty much that was it. That was the sort of spark in me. I went back and told who's my now wife, then girlfriend, I said, you know what, this I can do this. I'm going to have a crack at this. She was like, are you sure? You know, the usual. I like that with my partner. She's really good like that. She always makes sure that I'm always thinking, and I don't jump. I have a tendency to sometimes jump in head first because I'm such a positive person. But you know, I thought I'd go back, and the rest is really history. I built up my career there. I started as a volunteer, as I said, and I worked my way through. Within about 3 months, they'd put me on my first coaching badge, given me some paid sessions, and I started just replacing my personal training hours with coaching hours. In 2007, so actually, let me rewind. I was then moved on to be lead of Southall from about late 2004 to 2006. I started being head coach, leading on the social inclusion stuff. I started working in schools casually as well to get that side of my teaching rather than coaching stuff, developing a coaching style. So my coaching style is friendly but firm and fair. In other words, you will get me being on side with you if you do as I ask, but at the same time I want to develop you. But if you start making mistakes with me, I don't mean mistakes like on the pitch, I mean with behaviour, you'll see the Alex Ferguson side of me come out, which is the hairdryer treatment.
Triple F.
Yeah, you know. It has to be done at times. But that was me developing. I was becoming a coach, a real coach, and going from somebody who loved the game to watch. I was studying sessions all the time, and I was getting experience, and I'd pop my head in to what was the Centre of Excellence, as still is, moving into an academy now. But in 2007, the organisation became a community sports trust, so a charitable organisation. They moved out the ground, you know, Griffin Park, very small, and they became a community sports trust charity in their own right, and they moved to Half Acre House, which is just off the high street. I got offered as part of the expansion role, and it was my first multi-sport role. They said, would you like, we know you love your multi-sport, because I'd started developing multi-sport on the States within our holiday and weekly programs. And
so multi-sport, is that like kind of hockey, quick cricket, that kind of thing?
Quick cricket, tennis,
I love quick cricket.
Basket, b-ball, obviously as well, like 3-on-3 stuff, all the really cool stuff that the kids do, and having mini leagues and stuff that the kids really got into, getting them enthused, and we did quite long sessions. Anyway, 2007, listen, there's a tennis program. We've got a partner on it who's funding it. Middlesex Lawn Tennis Association are involved. A couple of years program. we need to get young people between the ages of 5 and 8 playing tennis in BA, EM, Black, Asian, ethnic minority communities and turn it into a year-round sport, not just 6 weeks around Wimbledon. I didn't have a single tennis qualification, but I knew tennis. I played a lot of tennis as a boy, and I still play now occasionally. I took it on board. I got both my level 1, level 2 qualifications within 6 months. That was the challenge. That's why I love challenges. They weren't sure, and I did it. Made a lot of mistakes at the start of the program because I was coming in. I was coming in from being the coach now. I was coming into the environment of the club and the community department. I was learning how to be a professional in that world rather than just being the guy in the tracksuit. I was learning to be the suit, the one I was talking about. And the rest is history. I developed that in 2008. The program fundamentally changed. We lost the funding part of the recession, and I had to then find a way to develop it. So I then so we were giving tasters out to schools for free because we had the funding, and then they'd give us an after-school club, and then we'd try and develop a hub. So we'd have maybe 5 schools, and you'd have a central, say maybe club to feed in children who were either talented into one section or for mass participation, like an evening weekend club. Don't care how good you are, bad you are, that's not the reason why. Come in, we're going to make you love this sport, and we're going to teach you something while you're there. Make you feel confident, make some new friends. Parents get involved, become volunteers as well. We're going to give fruit out, we're going to do all sorts. Brilliant, worked well. Funding got cut, oh my God, what are we going to do? So, cut a long story short, I redeveloped the program. I started using the money we were generating from the after-school clubs to then fund the tasters backwards, which meant we did lose the upper tier, but it did give us a consistent program. My community line management team obviously were quite happy with the work I was doing, and in the end of 2008, moving into 9, Richmond, which had the KICS program, the Premier League initiative, was having some problems because of the recession. And generally, Richmond's a very difficult area to work in anyway. It's a very sparse borough, so getting young people involved in programs is difficult. They saw that, because with the role I was doing with the tennis, I was still sharing my social inclusion head role. I was doing a lot of work, a lot of hours, because I was really into it now, and I was really pushing the boundaries of what I could
You're into
achieve.
something you can't help.
And I was pretty much not saying no to work. Because I wanted it so much. They said, listen, we're looking for an interim person, not to manage it, just to sustain what's going on. And the first thing I had to do was save the whole of the project. It was going bust. So what did I do? I just did what I'm good at. I went out and started meeting people, went to the programs to watch them, took notes, took pictures, videos to see what was going on. And we saved it. We saved one of the 2 KICS programs. We had to shut one down, unfortunately, but we got the local authority involved. And they'd been involved in it before, but not to any really high level. They'd backed it, but we managed to get them to put some hands in their pockets and give us a bit of finance to run it. And that's where my funding experience started coming from. I did bits and pieces before, but now I began to start writing funding bids. And eventually I got transferred to become the full-time development manager for the whole of the social inclusion department in Richmond, so I oversaw KICS. And then I personally brought in Street Games, which is a Sport England initiative, which is a fantastic program. And funnily enough, Motiv8 are now going to be a Street Games partner as well, so we're moving in with them. But fast track to 2011, I'd now completed 8 years at an organisation. I was now working with diverse people from across the board. We had elite sport within social inclusion, so we were developing young footballers who we were trying to then bring into the mainstream football club, but unfortunately I just ran out of time. I never got a chance to finish that section of my job. We went from having 1 programme when I was there to going down to 1 KICS program in 2008. When I left in 2011 at Richmond, we had 6 programs covering over 30 hours of weekly multi-sport, 50 weeks a year. So that was, and remember, that's also generating work for people. And I was recruiting from either within the borough or near localised boroughs. We were working with youth offending as well, and we were working very closely with the primary care trusts and youth working teams in the area to get the appropriate young people to get involved. And that pretty much was my career that made me think, you know what, I'm pretty good at this now, but I still haven't done what I need to do in my life. And I left. I left at a point which I thought I needed a new challenge. I actually left to try and maybe think about going to another football club, if I'm being honest. But Motiv8 was in my head. It didn't have a name back then, but what is now known as, you know, the artist now known as. And that is that really. Long story, but I could keep going on, but so many people I met along the way and so many fantastic positive influences in my life and people who are now have gone from colleagues to become friends.
Anyone you want to give a shout out to in terms of Motiv8? Let us know who's involved.
Well, in terms of Motiv8, certainly to my business partner, I don't like to call him that because he's my confidant, he's my colleague, he's my co-founder, to Farhan, Ralph, Faz. He's a fantastic, person who we became friends at Brentford. He was Ealing manager, I was Richmond manager. We both started, he started on kicks when it first started. And funnily enough, we didn't actually meet each other for the first 2 years that we were working at Brentford. He was off working in one side of Ealing and I was on the other side of Ealing. We knew who each other were because we had mutual colleagues, but we finally did meet each other and it's just a spark, and we're probably as close. I have friends that I've grown up with, but he is someone, having known him, he's like the sort of person that he just knows what I'm thinking. I know what he's thinking, and we have our disagreements with Motiv8. That's normal. Like, I'm sure you and Gav and the guys all do it here and there.
Especially when it comes to teams.
He's an Arsenal fan as well, so there you go. So you can tell straight away it's just like you and Gav all over again. But it's all good. There's two of our coaches who I definitely want to give a shout out to, who are Satpal and Danny. Satpal is a young lad that we've been working with for a while. He was one of Faz's coaches from back in the day, and he's now become one of our lead coaches in his early 20s. Fantastic young man, looking after his family, a fantastic role model in the West London community. Danny's one of our youngest guys, 17 years old, and he's one of our lead holiday coaches. I can't say enough about this boy, and I want to give him a shout out because he's so humble. I'm sure when he sees this, he'll be like fast forwarding it. But no, another fantastic role model. Kids over in he's based in Hounslow. Satpal's based in Ealing, but he works in Hounslow as well. He's a Hounslow lad, and he's running one of our football programs, and he's only 17. I think that pretty much says it all, that we have that much trust in him. And there's one other young man who's come full circle with us that I want to give a shout out to, who's Indiraj Sandhu, Indy. He is someone that I met in that first session 10 years ago. And he stuck with me, and he was a fantastic young man, never in trouble, not one of those boys, the opposite, just a lovely young guy. Got married to his childhood sweetheart just a few months ago, only in his early 20s. His university course ended through the recession. He was going to be an engineer for BA, and he called me. So he'd been with me as a player. He then went off to university, and I thought, fantastic, go on with your life. He called me, this is several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, and he said, listen, Sam, my course has been cancelled. I don't know what to do. I said, come in, you're going to be a volunteer. You can come volunteer on one of my projects at Brentford. We turned him from a volunteer to a community development manager in his early 20s. He was in charge of Ealing Street Games, which I think is one of the greatest successes of my career, to be so proud. I can talk about players all day long. I'm not bothered about that. It was to turn a young man and to rebuild his life within a year, and to give him an opportunity from being a volunteer to a coach, to being a development manager, writing his own bids and having his own staff. He's now recently left. He's come into Motiv8 with us. So he's gone full circle as well. And he's doing all the things that I'm doing now. He's doing in his early 20s. He's a married man. He's just a fantastic human being. And I hope he's blushing when he hears this. And there's one other shout out to Girls on the Ball, to who you know well.
Sophie and Rachel, yeah.
I cannot praise enough. They're more current, because most of the guys are from my past. They're current. They are probably two of the most influential and positive young girls that I've ever met in my life. And we are going to work with them in one way or another, so definitely watch out for that. But you guys know it.
Here first.
Yeah, you guys know it, and I cannot praise them enough. They are just awesome. They're just fantastic girls, and I take my hat off to how much they're doing and how much they've done in such a short space of time. And Scotty.
Yeah, Pitch Talk's favourite rabbit.
Scotty. And that's that. I could do it all day. Don't ever give me an Academy Award, because it'll be... Yeah. The music, when the music kicks in? Yeah. But when the music kicks in, I'll be like, sorry, that's only 1%. I'm not leaving. Yeah, there's a few.
How would you sum up Motiv8 Sports and Fitness in a few words?
I think it's what we said before, to be honest. We create human beings, not players. Everything else comes secondary to making an individual who's happy, who's balanced, who understands where their place in society, in the world, and can contribute towards society in a positive way, either through their actions or their words. And they put down any weapons or negativity that they may have had or feel like they're having, and they take on the football boot, the baseball bat, the cricket bat, the tennis racket, and they use that as their appropriate weapon of choice on the sports pitch. Life's too short. Why make it more difficult than it has to? Everyone has it tough, but I'd say Motiv8, we're trying our best to try and make our lives our lives and other people's lives fun, interesting, safer and more positive. That was more than a few words though. I can only apologise.
State of the game is our next segment, and obviously, knowing you as one of the Pitch Talk family, you're a very opinionated fella.
I try.
And a question from our co-host, the G-Man, who says, "Hey Samir, it's been great speaking to you online about the rights and wrongs in football on the live show. What do you perceive to be the biggest problem/damaging factor in the modern game today, and what would be your solutions to fighting it?"
I'd probably say the lack of mentors or role models that are being appropriately used. Those that are not being appropriately used or are not being given an avenue to. Those that aren't, the question I have to ask is, A, why are you not a role model? I don't believe in this concept when people say they're not role models, because I think anyone who works is a role model. That's what I mean. I don't mean it because they're a footballer. Yeah. I mean it because they're somebody who has a job that pays money. Therefore, somebody will look up to you naturally. Yeah. They're the modern day rock stars. But then I would also say that that doesn't automatically mean that you have therefore a right to say, I didn't ask to be this. For me, I'm looking at grassroots though rather than elite. Mm-hmm. I think the problem with the elite game, with my gripe with role models, is that I think that they tend to be put into a bubble. Because I'm not actually blaming the footballer here, I'm blaming the system, be it through the money, although I think the money is secondary. I think it's the education. Now there are programs that are changing that, but we're talking about as a generic thing. It's too easy to become, like I've spoken to footballers who don't even know what day it is, literally, because it's training, match day. That's quite scary. Or I've heard stories of footballers who've been interviewed. I mean, we saw it recently with the Clark Carlisle depression one, where we had footballers there who were fearful of failure. There was one boy I remember specifically talking about he didn't want to let his father down or something like that, and you could see in his eyes there was a fear there. Where's the role model in that organisational club to have a word with him, or because he was a man, he was a young man. Yeah. Why did someone not at the age of 8 or 9 try and take him aside before that and maybe educate the parent as well and say, you do realise the likelihood of your child becoming a professional footballer is about that much? Yeah. Just to remind him that there are other opportunities. Because that boy will probably, or I hope he would if he doesn't make it, I couldn't see him going into coaching. Or if he does, he'll do it. You know why? Because it's the only way to stay in the game. That's not a reason to stay in the game. That's like breaking up with someone and then going out with another person straight after just to be with someone. Yeah. That's not staying in the game. That's doing it for the sake of doing it, you know? You have to do things for the right reasons. So I'd say for me, it's a lack of role models in the game, because I think that filters through in different things. There are, and when I say role models, I don't just mean like the number 9 on a pitch and the way he behaved. I'm talking about the way a community coach behaves, the way, I don't know, an administrator at a football club behaves on Twitter. Mm-hmm. I would say the way that, I don't know, someone who sells you burgers from a burger stall behaves on the weekend in the pub. Mm-hmm. Because we're all role models, that's my point. And I'm talking about the game as a whole. There's the family ethic is needed. There are not enough. And that's why I constantly point at Grassroots and say, that's a family club, that's a family club, that's a family club. And I would genuinely point, going back to my Girls on the Ball shout out, to the women's game and how the family ethic exists there and the players are accessible. The lack of accessibility to play it, from young people or any fan to a footballer, is there for obvious reasons, because of security and because of the nature of the industry that you're in now. Mm. They're commodities. Yeah. So therefore, their time is valued based on how much they're worth. Therefore, they're a commodity. Yeah. But then how can you expect them to look at young people or other people unless they've got a very strong constitution, i.e. a family or an agent or a club or a manager or etc. There aren't enough people or role models at the top to then filter that message down to those who are in the playing and administration and management side of the game, to then filter down to the bottom. And I always, you've heard me say it before, the opposite system. I see the grassroots at the top and I see the elite at the bottom, because I can't fundamentally believe. And like, for example, you get an academy coach. Not all academies like this, let me qualify that. But I have seen it. who will say to a player at 8 or 9, sorry, you're not good enough. You're not a role model then. Why aren't you telling that player where to go, you may be telling them all season where they've been going wrong, and you may be being told to, but that's why I have strayed not that far into academy sport, because I find it very difficult to be able to say that to anyone, let alone a child.
To a kid that age as well. Yeah.
Let alone a 25-year-old who's being let go by a club. Where does that player go? Oh, you can go into the system, you can go and do trials. No. Where are the mentors? Where are the release mentors that we know about? People can't say, yeah, they're there. Well, tell me who they are then. And I need to know what clubs get access to them. I need to know the routes into coaching and the routes into other employment. Not everyone needs to be a coach. So mentors for me, there are not enough of them in the game. So a mentor doesn't have to be the footballer, it just needs to be someone there.
Fan question?
Sure.
From Mike Harneman via email, the first of a couple of questions from him actually. When looking at the amount of homegrown players in the Premier League, over the weekend at that point, but and well, the lack of them, and as obviously you're trying to get more out of home, more homegrown talent out there, trying to get them spotted and that kind of thing. How do you feel that? Do you feel that the English FA could be doing more to get British players into the big sides?
I think the biggest. I think there's two points around this. Number one, there should not be a quota system. I don't want to see a return of the 3 foreigner rule, because that will intrinsically destroy it. It can't happen anyway because of EU restrictions. You can't go down that road. I think certainly there is an issue with the lack of players. I think the Premier League has a lot to answer for on that. But it is filtering into the Championship, because obviously now what's happening is that division is also having issues with clubs who are buying what you would call the second tier of international talent, and those who are ex-Premier League that are trying to get back in. I personally think the issue is such that the FA needs to, I think Greg Dyke is trying. I think he's begun to understand some of the issues around it. He's got a big job ahead of him. But that aside, in terms of what needs to be done, in my view, there needs to be a stronger development in the academies to stop bringing in foreign players at a younger age. There are several clubs which have been doing this for years, and I have a serious issue with bringing young children in and uprooting them from their homelands. And I'll be honest, even Barcelona do it. We've seen it with Messi, you know. And you can say, well, how could you stop? No, I'm thinking of the human being. I'm thinking of the football that
full of HGH, apparently.
Well, you know, that's another issue. But I'm thinking of what I see, which is young footballers who deserve a chance. And I'm not saying they don't get their chance because of the foreign players. They don't also get the chance because the coaches, again, going over to that, are not encouraged to use homegrown talent. They're encouraged to use the talent that is offered to them on the plate and may fit a service or system. So that's coach education. Are those coaches going to be educated to understand that it's not all about winning? All right, it is. Every game is about winning. But what I mean is that at a, say, under 16 level, do you want a footballer who thinks, I need to basically go to the gym and bulk up, or I need to take these supplements, or I need to stop eating the things that I enjoy once a week because I'm not going to get a pro contract? Or do you need them to realise that life has a balance, and yes, you do need to look after yourself, but you also need to be mentally strong, and that means being able to have that environment created for them. In terms of the Premier League now, it almost has to, I hate to say this, it almost has to go to a period where either there has to be an implosion, in other words, we have a very poor run in Europe and our coefficient ranking places start going down, which has been threatened in the past. I personally believe what probably could happen is that the FA do get directly involved, and they will have to do something at academy level and have to force football clubs to stop buying in this vacuum style mentality of bringing in every young player that's kicked a hat-trick in a training game and suddenly they're brought in to given a 1 or 2 year contract. It's just not, it's not feasible and it's not viable, because what happens to these foreign players then when they're not deemed suitable? They either get sent, they can't, well, you could say they get sent back, but where are they getting sent back to? I'm a global football person. I see the whole world as one. So for me, I don't actually have a problem with foreign players coming in. What I have a problem is the appropriateness of the system within the club to use them, and being those people in those clubs being educated enough to realise that you are not encouraging talent to therefore then be generated. That's why I think there needs to be an intrinsic link between grassroots and the top level. There is no link. I'm not talking about kicks. I'm talking about having, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 20 grassroots charter standard soccer clubs of a youth standard that have a link to a Premier League or Championship side, who then have the exchange of knowledge, and the players are also exchanging this, that and the other. In terms of other aspects, I think that another issue with regards to the lack of foreign players in the country, the lack of English players is also, let's be honest, most football clubs don't have an interest in the national side. It's a bit of a strain for them, really. They send their player that they're basically paying to go and play for a national team, England. The player might get injured, and they're still paying for it.
Well, Dean Ashton, as an example.
Yeah, his career was ended.
Yeah, and obviously West Ham were looking for compensation.
That to me means that there's an intrinsic imbalance, and there needs to be an honest sit down between the Football Association, the directors of, and the grassroots, and the Premier League, and the Championship, and our other 2 professional leagues. And they all need to sit down and work out a strategy which has the national team at the front of it. People talk about copying a German model, copying a Spanish model, copying a Dutch model. No, you take inspiration from those models and create your own model. You cannot copy a model. It's not humanly possible. People talk, for example, about Bayern Munich now being tiki-taka because of Pep Guardiola. They're nowhere near tiki-taka. They're still playing the model that they used, and that quite a few German sides are using, because of the way they've developed their talent. My argument is if you develop the talent in the right way and you educate the players to become stronger emotionally and mentally, you will stop needing to buy in international talent, because those players will naturally come through the system. The whole, what I was talking about with Motiv8, the holistic, build a human being. Some people blame the German model, for example, on just being a complete fluke, that there was quite a large immigrant surplus in the country, with Turkish, Polish, and other mass immigration during the last decade, and fortunately those people have come through as players. Yeah. Some people say they've stolen players, from other countries. That's why I think you can't copy a model. Because
but then if that was true, in theory, England would rule the world.
Yes, that's the point I was trying to say.
So
that's why I think you can't copy a model, because it's too easy
to
to break down the model and say, pick at it. You have to make your own model with its positives and negatives. And I genuinely believe that things can be rectified quite quickly within several years if people start realising that the grassroots and the structure of people are saying there's this new structure to academies, there's levels, there's tiers. That to me still doesn't fundamentally change the fact you can have a level 1 academy or a level 28 academy. I know there's not. But where's the individual telling you that those players need to be brought through? And they need to be given experience with the development squads in the first team, and then they need to be blooded gradually in. Why did Paul Pogba leave Manchester United? Because he didn't feel, for rightly or wrongly, he's doing all right, but rightly or wrongly, he didn't feel that he was developing properly. He has only recently been playing for the first team in France. He was playing in the under-19s over the summer. We've had players, as Stuart Pearce came out and said the other day, who refused call-ups. That to me is horrible.
That's a disgrace.
That to me is unacceptable at under 21 or full standard. That shows you that there's an imbalance when a player is telling a national side, I don't want to play for you. I've had a taste of the big time. I don't want to go down, basically.
I'm gonna, there's a current.
So that's a cultural, mental thing.
I mean, there's a current player who's obviously in the news, Adnan Januzaj. Adnan Januzaj, for those who might not know, but he's an interesting one at the moment, and we discussed him on Monday's show, and it's a case of with him, he's obviously got the choice of many countries, and Jack Wilshere has come out and said not even directly about Januzaj, although the quotes are being attributed that way. But it's a case of Jack Wilshere has come out and said only English-born players should play for England. Mm-hmm. Firstly, I'm going to ask, do you agree with that? And secondly, if someone like Januzaj, who I think is kind of can play for Belgium. There's the potential of England because of the residency rules. It's one of them. Do you agree with Jack Wilshere's comments? And secondly, do you think that the FIFA residency rules need changing in terms of players being able to choose which national side they play for them?
I think there's nothing wrong with a player if they've spent their formative years from, say, I don't know, they may not necessarily been born here, but maybe they've moved here for, I mean, I think you had a couple of boys who've come over here as refugees or migrants because they've been forced to, which means effectively that this is their homeland. You know, they may come from another part of the world, but they've had to come here for genuine reasons. I don't really have an issue with that if they've come in their formative years. But the problem with that then lies is where does the line in the sand draw? I would personally say if they've come here and they're, say, under the age of 10, for example, if it can be proved that there was genuine reasons for them to be here, that could be a decent FIFA rule. So a refugee status or somebody who's forced for whatever reason.
Seeking asylum.
Seeking asylum for genuine reasons. I personally would not want to see the young lad from Manchester United playing for England. That's not because or for any other reason that I just can't really fathom why that's necessary when we have a group of under-21 footballers and under-19 footballers who may have failed spectacularly over the summer, but still are, very many of them are playing in the top 2 tiers of our national game. So
do you think it's sending the wrong message if Januzaj ends up playing for England?
It's sending a message to me personally that, and this is of no fault to him, attributed to him, it's sending a message to certainly to coaches and other young people, for example, that, yeah, you can pretty much pick and choose. For him, he has several choices. That's down to because of his background. But on an English perspective, we're in a current state of flux. The English game has never been so, I think, ridiculed in the way that it is at the moment, and understandably so. The team is not a team. So, the other argument I'd say is, why would one player coming in change anything? This has to be a generational thing. It needs to be a generation of players who are brought up within a culture. Bringing in the odd player who's, I don't mean foreign, because that's not the way I think, because like I said, I'm global, who's not of that generation, to me, it can happen. I mean, you've had it with Owen Hargreaves, for example. It can happen. But then the system that I'm talking about wouldn't have allowed Owen Hargreaves potentially to have played, because he's come from Canada, spent the formative years there, and then comes over to Germany, and he probably would have ended up playing for Canada according to my rules. Yeah. But then I think that's only fair. That's my personal opinion. So that's probably what I would say. I would say that I would not like it purely on the basis that, looking at it again from the grassroots and the generational perspective that I'm trying to look at, I don't really understand how you can then develop players if you've got that mentality, because it's much of the same, the vacuum mentality. There's a place for young foreign talent in this country, but not in the English national team, because it's the English national team. And that does mean, yes, we have had a few players over the years. I think Ireland would have had a problem a few years ago. Yeah, that's a different story. They seem to be getting around that these days, but certainly during previous years, they would certainly not be too happy with my changes.
I want to ask you, just staying on that subject, considering we're in a state of the game. It's a case of, like, Greg Dyke has come out, and I think he's saying, yeah, we want to develop obviously more English talent. And they're looking to potentially work with the clubs. But apparently, it's been said that the Premier League doesn't want any part of it, and they're not willing to talk. Firstly, how damaging is a lack of support from the Premier League for initiatives such as Greg Dyke's comments about England getting to a semi-finals of 2018 and winning the World Cup in 2022? With those targets that Greg Dyke has set, being the head honcho at the FA, how damaging do you think it is that the Premier League does not want to be a part of it? And also, how damaging do you think it is the fact that there's so many managers in the Premier League who legitimately just don't have a reason to care about the indigenous national team? Because you look at someone like, say, Arsene Wenger, French, Jose Mourinho, Portuguese, even Brendan Rodgers, Irish. those three particular managers, David Moyes, Scottish, I'll throw him in there as well. Those particular managers don't necessarily, why do they need to give a damn about the English national team? Because it's not their country. So why do they need to give a damn? And especially, and if the Premier League is not giving a damn, then even more so, why should the managers give a damn about the English national team?
It is damaging in the sense that,
and how damaging is it? Yeah.
It's damaging in the sense that the Premier League is flexing its muscles and saying, we don't agree with you and these are our terms. It's damaging because I think the Premier League feels that, looking at it from the Premier League's point of view, why they're doing it, I'd say they're doing it because they're worried that they're going to lose ownership of the game, which they've worked so hard to create through the Premier League.
See, I think it's just that.
Well,
the mighty buck.
You've given the crude but effective sort of answer to what I was basically probably alluding towards. Power is money. You look at the multi-billion pound deal that's just been signed, sealed and delivered over this season. And it also then, therefore, you're talking about damaging, I just made the point about players refusing call-ups. If a club has no interest in the English national team, why would the player, who effectively is, as I said before in a previous conversation, the commodity of the team, be that bothered? Because who's paying his wages at the end of the day? You know, it's like you or I doing a favour for Joe Bloggs, but our job is telling us, why are you doing a favour for him when you're working for me? You know, you've done it for years for this person, but at the end of the day, your paymaster turns around and says, you know what, no, I'm paying your wages. I was letting you do this. Times are tougher now. You're going to do what I want you to do. Yeah. So it is damaging in a nutshell. It's not irretrievable, but it's certainly a very damaging situation. And it's dragging the good of the game through the mud. And I don't like that for that reason.
Yeah. No, I hear that. How important do you think St George's Park is going to be then, in terms of potentially trying to redress this balance, or do you think it's going to be like Lillishall, where it's kind of it's an elite place, but it just didn't have the legs to really last?
Well, I think it's doing good in some ways because I know of people who've gone up and done courses there. I know of grassroots organisations that have had access to it and have had their tours and have met people and done bits and pieces. I have just one problem. Why is there only one? In a country of 65 million odd people, why is there one facility for the whole country? Why are there not regional hubs, mini St George's? Why was so much money spent on one organisational hub? Why was it not spent on maybe 20 spread out through the country, and then you can have a less expensive one, maybe central where St George's is now? Because times are hard. We keep hearing about that. People don't have the money like they had. People may never have had the money like we're meant to have had. The other thing I'd say is, why was some of that money not used to give cheaper FA coaching courses for people? The average coaching course at level 1 is around 100 to 150. Level 2 is about twice that. UEFA B level 3 is about 800 and something odd last time I checked. And I'm not even going to tell you how much the other two are, 4 and 5, the pro license being 5. I want to see more investment in that. I don't need to see a glitzy place personally. If I never go to St George's, it's no skin off my nose. It's nice for the people who get a chance to go and see it, and I understand the English national team needs a hub, but then I was quite happy with them going around the country and training like they were doing before. I thought that was quite a good way for local fans to get access to the best, well, the creme de la creme in theory of our good game here. So I don't see why you couldn't have had a smaller, cheaper regional hub. Okay, you can go into all the semantics about land and all this. Listen, football clubs, if the Premier League was on board, football clubs could quite easily you could select one, do a random draw, get one that gives a little strip of land that's built to it. You then maybe give some money back to the organisation to do community work on it or whatever. You know, there are ways around this. That's my personal opinion. It has its place, but I wish there was much more available. Yeah, someone in Newcastle may not have the time, energy or money to get down to St George's.
Do you know, it's a great point you bring up because it's a great point you bring up there because even when Manisha Taylor was sitting here, we asked her about St George's Park as well, and she did mention about how expensive it is kind of cumulatively. It's a case of you've got obviously, let's say, a talk from an elite coach or something like that. That's a couple hundred. Travel, that's another bundle. Hotel, because you're gonna have to stay there, right? You're gonna have to end up staying there overnight. and all of that just kind of adds up. So
and taking into account a lot of coaches are not full-time coaches. I don't fundamentally believe that football coaching, there is such a thing as a full-time football coaching job as there was maybe several years ago. Now, even if you work in an academy or in the elite system, you're generally either going in at a certain level, so casual hours, part-time hours, and then building up, or you're coming in, like say, from the tops. In other words, you've already got stable income and you're taking another role. And then all the other jobs are community related or have a combination of community and elite. Either way, it's an investment, as you said. And that, to me, in the current climate, when you're trying to encourage more good, high quality coaches, the problem is, again, I was talking about market saturation earlier. There are so many poor coaches in this country. It's unbelievable. I'm not saying they're poor because they're rubbish. I'm saying they're poor because they're not adequately given post-coach education mentoring. To say to someone after they've done their FA level 1, right, you're going to need 6 months of regular coaching. Okay, well, where can I go? Okay, go on the FA website. No, I want to be able to pick up the phone to someone 24/7, and I need to be able to have maybe a regional mentor, maybe someone who's near me, an army of mentors, for example, who I can go and speak to regularly. You know, and I can then be a bit more aware of what I want to become. St. George's, therefore, can only be one of those solutions. There needs to be multiple solutions, whereby I would want more. And you know what, you'd be proud to visit a local hub like that. Imagine having a mini St. George's, like, and even a couple of hours away from you. If you have to take a train, I mean, don't get me wrong, St. George's isn't that far, say, from us in London, but I'm thinking throughout the country.
Someone in Newcastle, it's kind of, as you said, is...
You have one up there in the northeast, just a little one it doesn't have to be run on a lot. You could run it privately as well to generate a bit of money. You run it like a Gold Soccer Centre, for example, you have corporate stuff going on there when other organisations aren't using it. You can find ways to use the facilities appropriately. You might have international teams when they come over here will use those facilities and pay for that use. I'm just saying that it's not as, I don't know, maybe I'm the one who's the dreamer here, but I just think that the solution is there to be had.
Yeah. You know, dreaming is the word I'm going to stick on, because Mike Hardeman via email has sent in another question. What does it feel like for you when you see a player make it up through the ranks at a club such as Jai at Stevenage, who you have worked with on the fringes of the first team?
Well, I should just point out, I haven't personally worked with him. One of my close friends and colleagues, Bal Singh from the Khalsa Football Academy, has worked with him. I know of him and I'm hopefully going to meet him at some point. I can speak, though, about him because I know about him, but I can speak about players generally as well. So I don't know him personally, so I wouldn't want to talk for him. But certainly, when you see a player come through the system, what I would say is that the nicest aspect for me, because of the way that I live my life and the way my coaching ethos is, that they understand the humbleness that is necessary whilst mixing it still with the confidence needed, be it on the pitch and off the pitch, mentally and physically, to be able to keep going through all the pitfalls. This young man, I'm aware, has suffered with injuries. He won the Chelsea Asian Star of a few years ago and spent a year with Chelsea, but I believe he didn't have the easiest times because of injury. And he went back to Bal, who give a shout out to as well, and he just kept plugging away, and he got his dream because he kept trying. That's the thing. It's just great to see young people have determination, and from what I've been told, he has a good family as well. And the family doesn't always have to be mum and dad. The family could be your peer group, it could be the club, or in his case, the organisation he's connected to. It's a football academy, but it's actually like us, a community development organisation doing social inclusion work and talent identification. What is nice to see is also the development from a boy into a man. And when I say that, I don't mean on a physicality side, I mean the mental maturity. The best professionals that I've ever looked up to, or the best professionals, I'm not talking about my heroes, but people that I think are great pros, are people that I think understand, again, like myself, their place in the world and where they fit in and how they can adapt. You have to constantly adapt. This young man and other young men and girls, we've seen it in the women's side of the game now, have realised that it's not just about kicking a ball about for 90 minutes. It's about all the other aspects of it, be it from how you train, how you sleep, how you rest, how you have your relationships, how you communicate, how you portray yourself within society generally. A happy person generally is a successful person, no matter what anyone says. So on that side, when I see someone make it, and I genuinely believe that they've done the right things to get there, most people do, Some people have a little bit of luck here and there. Although I think it's created. Sometimes it's right time, right place.
Force around.
It fills me with the belief that society is not going to the dogs, as so many people say. And there is a lot of good things being done by good people, and good guys and girls can make it. It's not always what people think, that if you're a this, that and the other, if you're going to stab someone in the back, etc., that you're going to make it no matter what. Basically, not everyone in real life is like they are on The Apprentice. That's what I always think, you know? There are some good people being successful out there, and I'm glad that I've seen a few do it in my time, and many more will. He's one of them.
Health in football is our next segment. I want to ask you this personally. Do you think drugs are in football? And if yes, how bad do you think the problem is?
I think they are. I'd say on the casual side, definitely. I've had personal experience of knowing players from back in the day who take recreational drugs. To this day, I can't work out how they've got away with it. I don't think it's rampant. I genuinely don't think it's rampant. I think it's a social issue which is just there, you know. I don't personally take drugs. It's just not something that really rang out to me. Some people do it because they feel it's a peer pressure thing, the usual. Some people do it because they believe it's a cultural thing for them, whatever. Some, we saw, for example, with Kyle Walker recently, for example, some is just born out of, I don't know if ignorance is the truth, but nonetheless, it was a very stupid thing to do. Personally, if I was his manager, I would be fining him to the hilt, because that's the way I live my life, is that I cannot let someone do that and then have them coming into the club, because for me, it just doesn't add up to what I'm trying to achieve, which is, I'm not talking about building a machine here, but I want my athletes to be as powerful as they can be, you know? I'm not one of these guys who believes in having, you know, 10 7-foot-high footballers, but certainly if they're doing things like that, that's stunting them from doing that. And yes, they have to have social lives, don't get me wrong. But then I also have an issue with them being in a nightclub and all the usual things that go with that, because I'm really big on the family ethic with the footballer. But listen, guys are guys. I'm a bit older than I should probably look in that sense.
But you're a man of sobriety as well, so do you think that kind of...
It probably does to a certain extent, not warp my view, but it certainly, because I don't drink, I guess the mentality for me is because I can't be tempted. I do sometimes wonder about people who find it, you know, some people just can't say no, so you can't blame them for it. I'd say in terms of performance enhancing, I certainly think there have been issues around it. And I would cite what's happening in athletics and cycling. The problem that you have is that there are constantly these individuals who realize that there are ways to make money out of the system, which is by employing some very, very intelligent scientists and medicinists, pharmacists, to create the latest undetectable thing, you know. And the problem for the authorities and the anti-doping authorities specifically is it's always going to be a catch-up game, because they can only go as quickly as the new drug is prescribed. Whilst they are very intelligent and hardworking people, and I have a lot of time for anti-doping, and I was a Lance Armstrong fan, for example, so that shocked me. Or whilst I knew that there was something not right, my father passed away from cancer, and I still wear the Livestrong band because I take the ethos of what Livestrong is about. It shocked me because there was an individual there who managed, and I'm not talking about Livestrong, but there was an individual there who passed through the system for years when there were so many people talking about it, and finally the evidence mounted and he was caught out, which makes me think that it must be at some level within football. How can football be the only untouched sport? It's just not possible.
Well, then again, it was a case of
we had the Nandrolone
somewhere in Spain, there was a bunch of blood samples that were ordered to be destroyed by a court order, and there were apparently footballers' samples in there, but obviously we'll never know who now because that's all been destroyed. And we've seen Nandrolone stuff with Yapstam,
and the Dutch national squad issue. So what I'm saying is they can't be isolated incidents in the sense that they're one-offs, but I certainly don't think they're rampant as well. But I mean, there have been alleged issues with the Juventus team many years ago as well. Alleged, I can only stress alleged because there's no proof. It's all hearsay.
It was only the match fixing that was ever proved.
You know, so sometimes it is tittle-tattle, because when things are going wrong, it's easy to just lump things into it. When you have the Nandrolone or other issues, you know there are deeper and darker things going on. If you link it, for example, to the aspects of match fixing and other aspects that are potentially going on within, we hear in this country. We heard about that non-league match that was had a flurry of bets last season, and it was a completely random game.
We heard of a non-league player getting banned for drug abuse very recently, a former Everton trainer.
Yeah, I mean, for example, and drug dealing as well. A couple of former footballers have been in prison for it. So, although that is recreational rather than performance enhancing. I can't comment on what's going on in the British game because, you know, you don't know. I can't think of anything that's happening. But then, is that because there isn't, or is that because that there is something that's undetectable? For me personally, I'm very glad I'm not a footballer, because the thought of me, I mean, the stories I hear about footballers who just will blindly take things that their medical team via the coaching team have told them to take because it's good for them. I mean, Kolo Touré is a great example of what happened to him.
The diet pills and that, yeah.
He did it because he saw what his wife was doing. He was told when he came back from, I think it was a summer break or a holiday break, you've gained a few pounds, and he thought this is a quick way of doing it. He thought, oh my God, why didn't I read the box? Now, again, we're going down a road where we're going with a story. It was alleged. He was then punished for it. He was subsequently further punished for it, blah. That, to me, it could be an education thing as well. That I think, again, I've talked a lot about it tonight. Players need to be taught to say what's in that. If you go to a bar or pub or club, 9 times out of 10, what do they tell you to do? They tell you, don't take a drink from a stranger because you don't know what they might have dropped in it.
Of course.
Right? It's a cynical way of living life, but unfortunately that's the life we live in.
Well, yeah, we live in a world with Rohypnol.
We live in a world where there is a minority of people, unfortunately, who want to cause a little bit of mayhem, some of it quite serious. Taking that into conceptual for what we're doing here is we need to have more individuals, and I'm not talking about testing authorities, I'm talking about, again, the footballers. They need to be trained to sometimes question what's going on. Listen, they may be getting thousands of pounds, some of these guys, an hour, you know, for what they're doing, but if they were given a substandard meal at a Michelin star restaurant, they would send it back, because if they didn't taste right or look right, they'd send it back. But then at the same time, they're also being blindly told, take this, it's good for you, it's going to make you into this and the other. There are some footballers I know of who are very actively aware of what goes on in their bodies, because you know it because you see them after they finish playing and they're still looking after themselves, you know, and they're not taking drugs, you know, they're taking the performance enhancing supplements, which are more than legal. For me personally, I have an issue generally with the performance enhancing industry, because I think that it worries me because the long-term side effects of what actually people are taking in on the legal side, they've not been taken long enough for people to work out what is going on. I mean, you look at steroid abuse and what people now are going through from those who were taking it in the 60s and 70s, where their bodies are completely shutting down on them. The heart murmurs are a big issue, and we have issues, unfortunately, with some footballers who have been having heart. I'm not saying they're taking drugs, I'm saying who knows what side effects from supplements that they're causing on the heart. Creatine's a great example of a very legal supplement, but if you take it incorrectly, it will completely destroy your body, because your immune system will not be able to handle that amount of, as I call it to the kids when I've spoken to them about it, because I don't want to go too biological on them, I've said that amount of energy flowing through your body. I said it's like over pumping a car, you know, with fuel.
But it's kind of like, I know from obviously knowing you off camera as a case, I know you're a wrestling fan, and mentioning the steroids and that. I mean, you're getting over the past 20 years, you've had a lot of wrestlers dropping dead at 40.
Which can only lead you to determine one thing.
You look at certain problems that guys have had with in terms of heart attacks, in terms of concussions and brain injuries, kind of different thing. But
I think you have to correlate it as well. Sorry to interrupt. You have to correlate it as well to the lifestyle as well. A lot of these young men, whilst they've been taking these supplements, be they steroids in wrestling or legalized supplements in professional sport, their lifestyles have been quite fast-paced. They've lived maybe 50 years in a 20-year cycle, not a lot of sleep, not a lot of rest, and also filling their body with high levels of protein and other high-level sustenance, complex carbohydrates to keep themselves flowing over. The body cannot sustain that over long-term periods. So my fear for them is, even if it is legal, or if it's illegal, if it's illegal, it's unregulated. Therefore, you're dicing with death, full stop, from the minute you put it in. If it's legal, whilst there is a regulation in terms of we know what's going in it, and we know it's not illegal, and we know up to a point it's not bad for you, you don't have a long enough catchment period, though, with some of these legal supplements to work out, like I said, on top of the lifestyle, on top of stress, and on top of other aspects of their life, actually what the long-term damage is. So my argument is it's not just the illegal supplements that may be a problem. It could be the legalized stuff as well. You look at a footballer now and they look like a piece of artwork if you see their bodies. Like Cristiano Ronaldo is a great example of the way he's developed from the scrawny, lanky lad that joined from Sporting.
And you saw him taken out by Władysław Kishishev.
You saw him on the weekend when he pulled his shirt off after he scored his goal, and he's like an Armani model in the way he looks. He is chiseled, as we call it. He is the perfect human being in his look. I'm not saying he's doing anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm pretty sure he's pretty legal. But what I'm saying is, long-term wise, what damage are people like that doing to themselves with having that body, that perfect body, and the maintenance needed on it? It's like having a fast car and it's in the garage every day. The car needs to be driven, but also, does it need to be pushed to within its limits every time? I don't think so.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned about the lifestyle, because Big T, aka Tom Hewitt, via email has asked another question. He asked, what is your opinion on footballers getting drunk before a football match? Do you believe that some find it hard to juggle the strains of both alcohol and football in their day-to-day lives? I'd like to apply the same question about drugs as well.
I don't think it's acceptable to be, you know, off the rails in any walk of life before you've got something to do. So we're having a chat here, obviously on Pitch Talk. If I went home after this, although I don't drink, and I got drunk and I've got work in the morning, for example, that's unacceptable, because that's not what life's about. There's nothing wrong with getting drunk per se. Listen, there's nothing wrong with getting a bit tipsy.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying
maximum impetus on the bit. No, there's nothing wrong with it in the right environment, being around the right people. T's made a great point about the pressure. Pressure leads you to make choices, and alcohol or drugs or sleeping around or spending money in casinos and having pictures of people taking you with money all over your face, as we've seen.
God,
I can't judge, because I don't know what that person is going through. And then that links into mental health issues. Many of these people could be dealing with things in their own way, and this is the pressure cooker mentality. The way they release the steam is by going out and spending large amounts of cash in bars and buying bottles of Moet and Cristal and downing bottles and having, you know, bottomless chuggers and all that. Because that's what they think is appropriate, because of maybe either they've seen it around them, and again, it's education. They've grown up in that football world maybe and seen the pros doing it. They've broken through to the first team. What's the first thing they do? They go to a party maybe that they've seen. There was a famous story, quote unquote, allegedly of a certain football club which used to have parties where girls were invited. And I'm not going to comment on the club, but when a certain manager found out, and he hit the roof about it. There was another example of a club, Tottenham, which is well known, when Harry Redknapp found out about the golfing holiday that was in Ireland, and ended up they went out partying instead.
That's cool.
I can't remember if it was a golfing holiday. They went for training or something.
Sounds like an episode of The In-Betweeners.
Yeah, I think it was the way they did it. But the point I'm saying is that what does that tell you about society, that they're even lying to their own manager about what they're getting up to? The other thing is, a lot of these, going back to the story about the girls, like it was like a party, girls were invited from all over the city, and it was like a private party, and all these footballers were there.
I read about that in The Secret Footballer as well.
It's
mentioned.
I know the club.
It's mentioned that length in The Secret Footballer. Yeah, that's a really good book.
It's quite shocking, but some of those players were punished and sent out on loan after that. The manager, very well-known manager, decided, you know what, I have to make a point. But what frightened me wasn't the fact he had to make the punishment, it was the fact it happened. Which made me think that this is a problem. You have a lot of young footballers, young being the operative word, who've not seen much of life. They've seen life, some of them have had tough lives, they've worked hard to get where they are, whatever. But remember, they've sacrificed a lot in their lives as well. So they haven't had maybe the street smarts and the skills to deal with maybe the world that they've suddenly been thrust into. You go from a guy who's earning maybe 50, 60 quid a week, right in the bottom level. I hate that term, but that's what it is. All the way, and then suddenly he's propelled in and he's on 50 G's a week, right? And he's then told, you've got an asset manager at the club. What's the asset manager going to do? The asset manager tells you how to spend your money wisely. He doesn't tell you to not go to a party or not show up at this event, or if you're going to a club.
Well, he's just managing the money.
Because they say they have money management.
He's managing the money, not the person.
But you'll have a footballer who'll go to a club, right? and there was an incident recently with a Swindon footballer who's, I think, is he Swindon? That was sent to prison. I don't know if it's Swindon or Sheffield Wednesday or Sheffield United.
That does sound familiar.
I can't remember the club, so apologies for that. But it's definitely a footballer who's in the news recently for punching, and he had a history of this. So he's obviously got a problem. He's hit a person about a year or two ago, and he assaulted another person who was a fan of his own club. So evidently, I feel sorry for this young man because he's now gone to prison and his career could be potentially over. We've heard stories about other footballers as well.
Marlon King.
Who unfortunately have really let themselves down because they were at the peak of their career when that happened as well, and quite understandably went to prison for what happened on that night to that poor young lady who did nothing. My issue is, say for example, you've got not so much the gentleman that you spoke about, but other people, you've got a young footballer. Who's telling them who to go with? Make sure you go with somebody who can look after you if something goes wrong. They're not going to do that. They'll go up, they'll turn up in their Bugatti or their latest car that they've bought with their first set of wages because they're a baller now as far as they're concerned. They've made it. That's another problem because they haven't made it. They haven't won anything. They haven't achieved anything. Some of these kids.
It's a bit like Ravel Morrison.
But it's not just the kids. It's also older footballers as well who setting the wrong example. And they'll get smashed and whatever. But then it's not even that. It's sometimes how they portray themselves. You had the Nicholas Bentner thing with the
legend in his own mouth.
Yeah. That wasn't. I would say it was probably alcohol fueled, but it was a different sort of thing. That was embarrassing for him. That was him making himself look foolish, and he makes statements all the time. So
we've seen it with Ledley King, but last year they stumbling out of clubs.
Yeah,
And it's
who's a fantastic role model, as we know. But again,
it's just such a shame. I mean, do you think older players in the game should be more kind of not necessarily more role models, but more kind of
they know the game.
Saying to youngsters, you know what, there's going to be a lot of crap. I know you've mentioned in passing earlier, but do you think older players can have a more
I think they can,
role?
but I don't think it should be restricted to older players because I think older players can be just as cretinous, if I'm being honest, if not worse. Craig Bellamy, for example, only in his last couple of years as a pro has become probably a model pro, strangely enough. If you asked him to do what we needed him to do, say 5, 6 years ago, and he was in his late 20s, which I would call past his peak, he would have probably just laughed in your face. I think maturity is not denominated by age, but I think as you get older, there is a natural expectation for you to pass on whatever wisdom you have. Unfortunately, we have footballers who can't ever do that, and they may learn post. I mean, you look at the poor story of Paul Gascoigne.
You know, hold that. I was just about to ask you, how do you think the FA, PFA and those kind of entities handle ex-players? Obviously, we've seen the Gascoigne story, which is sad for a multitude of reasons. That was actually going to be my next question.
I have a lot of time, but not a lot of people may agree with me. I have a lot of time for the PFA. I think they're trying, but I think they're fighting a slightly losing battle because the problem has begun with the player at the club. And you could say, whilst the PFA has a direct link to the club, obviously that link is obviously not strong enough. I would have hoped that the PFA would have been given authority to employ somebody to work at the club as a direct contact link. It could be the union representative is trained to deal with these things, or they have somebody from maybe outside of the club who understands alcohol or mental health issues. We saw again, I spoke about it before, Clark Carlisle with the depression documentary. Depression is a serious problem in society. Yeah. It's a serious problem in every society.
We had the hour and a half,
which I contributed to.
Special feature. Yeah,
it's a serious issue, and alcoholism, drug abuse, they're all issues which will have elements of mental health issues around them. Not everyone who has a mental health issue becomes an alcoholic or drug abuser. I'm just saying that there is synergy when those two areas are hit.
Yeah.
I would certainly say that. I think the FA definitely has to take it more seriously, because if it wants a generation of talented footballers, again, like I was telling you what Motiv8 are about, they need to start developing human beings first and understanding that human beings have human failings, and you cannot avoid them by sweeping them under the carpet by saying, we're going to send them to this, that. The Paul Merson thing was the most shocking thing I've ever seen in my life. Those tears, when we all knew, me as a football fan, he was not the only one who was having those problems. Yeah. And he's had subsequent problems since. Ray Wilkins, most recently. You've had George Graham, who's come out and said that he's had... Lots of people have come out and said... So what does that say? It doesn't say that it's not saying that there's a massive problem in that sense. I'm not saying there's a big alcohol issue problem.
You're saying there needs to be more help there.
There's a lack of consistent help for these people. Like when we We as lay people have a problem, and we're at the end of our tether and there's no one else to speak to. You have Samaritans, for example.
Yeah.
Who do footballers have? They're not going to call Samaritans.
Yeah.
They're not in that world.
Yeah.
They need someone on their level to say, sit down, let's talk, or let's go out of this. Let me take you away from the club for a few hours to a peaceful, safe environment where you won't be judged, where you won't have your colleagues wandering around, because it's a small goldfish bowl and things get held. Because a lot of it is still old school in its mentality. A man is a man, and this, that, and the other. It's changing.
But do you think the club has more of a responsibility in terms of helping that? Because obviously we've seen examples in wrestling with the WWE, obviously them paying for guys like Sean Waltman, ex-Pac, Scott Hall paying for a number of his rehabs as well. Do you think clubs need to be more need to do that more for more ex-players? Obviously Tottenham have been very helpful with Paul Gascoigne. They've always tried to help and reach out.
There were a number of former players and organisations and even celebrities who helped Paul Gascoigne in this latest unfortunate situation recently when he needed to go to America. So yes, I'd say yes they are, but also do take into account clubs. There are clubs that are doing it, but for obvious reasons they're not going to promote it because they can't let people know that a footballer may be suffering from mental health issues, so they need to privately do it. Yeah. And you have organisations, Sporting Chance, for example, who sadly lost their, obviously, founder recently, who passed away very sadly, I briefly met several years ago, and Tony Adams obviously co-founded it. They have organisations like that, and they're very, very private. They will not tell you about. So, I mean, they have had players go to them. I think Joey Barton went to them, for example, for some course of anger management, or they offered it to him or whatever. Yeah. And I think a few others that have been in the papers. But generally, there are organisations that do it very quietly. For obvious reasons, it's a sensitive issue. It's not something people need to get out. Mm. But I would say that it needs to be probably done from pastorally, it needs to be done from the day a boy or girl walks into a football club. So in other words, be they 5, 6 or 7. I'm not asking a 5 or 6 or 7 to get counselling, that's not what I mean. Just to have someone that they know that's there. We call them club welfare. We call them welfare officers, for example, in the community side, who keep an eye on child safeguarding. You could have a similar type of welfare officer for young footballers who they have to meet maybe once a week as a part of their ongoing football education. Some clubs are doing that now anyway, to encourage them to talk about feelings.
All right, that's
it is happening.
Yeah, so that's the mental side. That's the mental side of it, and the psychological side of it. Sorry, Big T, aka Thomas Hewitt, has another question for you as well. He said, as someone who takes great care and attention when it comes to fitness within the game, I would like to ask your thoughts on the following. Do you think that there is enough being done at present by governing bodies to prevent heart disease in footballers? Because obviously we've seen what happened, the unfortunate incident with Fabrice Muamba. I think, and obviously some of those things can be easily missed. I
think they are taking it more seriously. I think if you look at the medical profession that's linked to football clubs, they are probably, especially in the Premier League, it's never been so good. And you will have, obviously, your St John's Ambulance, and you will have qualified medical professionals at every single club. They may not be full-time, but they're definitely attached to the club. And you'll have some sort of, medical assistance available on site. I think this comes down to not clubs' interest in it, because a club would be stupid to think that it's not interested in it, and we'd be stupid to also think they're not. I think what it is, though, that clubs need to realise that there are far more issues that maybe that they realise now. With Fabrice Muamba's condition, I know what the next situation is, that they want to have a defibrillator available at every single ground.
Smart move. Should already be there.
It should already be there. And funnily enough, there was something on the news when I was listening today where they were talking about wanting a defibrillator in every, I think just literally every office or every community space that is where they have large swathes of people. Just the standard. So therefore, I think maybe we need to look less at football and more as a societal issue for that. That is an issue which is linked to health and is linked to probably, you tend to find also during financial downturns, people tend to eat less well because times are hard and they have to spend money on things that they may not necessarily have been able to they would in the past, but now they're having to cut back, which means unfortunately people are buying foods or having to live lifestyles which are highly pressured, which means things like chronic heart disease and other areas like stress that can lead to heart attacks.
High blood pressure.
High blood pressure, it can happen. So I think whilst football is beginning to take such things seriously, I think society also as a whole needs to. So I can see a buy-in there, where maybe the medical profession via the NHS and private medicine and also private industry and football clubs need to come together to have a discussion based around that. Because certainly, I mean, why couldn't you have football clubs that get involved with that and sponsor defibrillators to be put into certain aspects and certain places? Because it works, it's a win-win situation. I am being a very positive spin type world on that, but I'm just saying I think there's a multi-buy-in in that. There's an argument there that says it's not just about football. It's you could have rugby clubs, any sports organisations get involved, get private sponsorship linked to it, whatever. It's not going to be cheap, but at the end of the day, what life is worth losing?
Well, life is priceless.
Not for that. Not for anything, but definitely not for that. Not preventable.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, this is one of the questions I've been waiting to ask.
Shoot. Shoot.
It's another question from Big T, aka Tom Hewitt. You're going to regret saying the word shoot, and here's why.
Here we go.
After reading the survey in the Independent newspaper, I would like to ask your thoughts on the following fitness debate. Do you think that footballers who engage in regular sexual activities can indeed have improved cardiovascular fitness and therefore be able to last longer on the pitch? Or is this just complete superstition? Big T.
I can't really answer that like seriously, but I can give you an answer.
Yeah, but what do you reckon?
No, that's it. No, because it's just we'll put it like this. Let me do a two-pronged answer. No, because statistics can prove whatever you like, and they must have been having a slow news day that day. Yeah. And two, no, because isn't it pretty glaringly obvious that you're using energy?
Yeah, you're knackered.
I can't really explain it any other way.
After.
Not unless you're, how can I put this in a nice way, not very good at it. You're not gonna be sitting there and going, yeah, you know what, love, I've got a game in the morning, or I've got a game in an hour. Can we do it at 50% maximum potential? She's just gonna look at him and just say, you know what, I don't care how much you're earning, get out.
You know, should say that. But
that's another story. Maybe we have to bang that back to him. We have to get Big T to give his answer on that. Maybe he's got some experience that we don't know about. It's a very strange question. No, I wouldn't expect anything less strange. But there you go.
I know. I mean, so are you of the kind of Gianluca Vialli school of thought, where it's like, you know what, allow sex the night before the game, get a good night's sleep, no sex?
I think it's like an exam or anything in life. You have to have a restful sleep. Look, don't get me wrong. There are some who will manage to, you know, they'll do what they're, like people who go out all night.
Yeah.
My cousin's like that. He'll go out all night and then the next day he'll be like, but then on the weekend, it'll catch up with him. It has to catch up with you somewhere. Something has to give. That's the nature of life. It's the seesaw effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
So my argument is that psychologically it might feel like it's a good idea at the time, but physically, I don't care what anyone says, that's still a percentage loss that is necessary. And that's where the sacrifice comes in. You're an elite athlete, so you do, whilst on one hand I'm talking about supplements and all that, but then you'll get one of these guys who'll think, well, I'll take my supplements and I'll be fine, I'll just train harder tomorrow, I'll work harder on the pit. Yeah. But then why? If you're already thinking that, you're straight away thinking that I'm already starting 10% behind everyone else, so therefore we are right, it isn't right.
Yeah.
Samir Sawhney. PE teacher and co-director and co-founder of Motiv8 Sports and Fitness. Hip hop and rap. No comment. I can't think of one. Keith Sweat, Twisted. Meatballs and spaghetti. Lasagna. Lunch. At home. Westfield.
Oh, wait, Stratford or
West. Shepherd's Bush. All Saints. trainers, good fellas. It's got to be The Wire. Funkmaster Flex. Stevie Wonder. John Barnes. Liverpool. Kenny Dalglish. My father. Myself. Happy.
The future is our final segment. From our co-host, the G-Man, playing or coaching, which is the most rewarding for you?
Coaching.
That's a pretty easy answer.
Because I can still do it without getting injured.
I like that. I like that answer.
Well, it depends on the session. If it's like some of my coaches when they're trying to cross a ball and I get hit in the head, that's a different story. trying to show off at the end of a session and they end up breaking a car window, then no. No, coaching. It's just given me everything I could ever want. And you know why? Because playing was something I grew up with and I naturally had an affiliation to. Coaching was something that I immersed myself in it, and I had to love it, even though initially I thought this isn't for me. So the fact that I want it more and it gives so much to me, it's because I had to work at it. And with playing, it was more of a natural thing for me. I just pick up and kick and learn how to dribble and do my flicks and touches. And with coaching, it's like, it's never ending. Not that playing isn't, but also it's maybe a mentality and age thing for me now. I'm at a stage in my life where I've spent over 10 years doing it now, of the mature phase of my life. Yeah. From compared to as the formative, maybe cruder side of my life when I was trying to become something I didn't. Now I am something that I work towards, and that's the first time in my life I actually completed some long-term thing. You know, do you think a man in that sense?
Do you think that will change? Do you think anything will change with age, or have you've mentioned you've already kind of undergone that change?
I think I will. I think I'll change. I think I'll change in the sense that as Motiv8 grows and we start developing programs where we have plans to obviously have players that we mentor through our systems and then hopefully through some sort of professional system, a professional system that we want to be a part of. We will not let players, for example, go through a system that we're not happy with. Mm-hmm. The playing side will come back, because right now it's all about the grassroots. It always will be. But as I do more things, and obviously as we go international, the playing side will be important because it will be a very large aspect of what we do. So yeah, I think so. But then also it's an unpredictable thing as well. You never know what's around the corner, but I like that. You can prepare for the inevitable, but also realize that inevitability changes as quickly as the days change.
You know, that kind of ties in nicely with our next question. What does the future hold? What does the future hold for Motiv8 SF and more specifically for Samir Sawhney? What does the future hold?
Well, I'd say certainly for me, for Motiv8, let's start with Motiv8. We're going to become a stronger, more well-known organisation, certainly. I'm pretty sure of that. And we're going to hopefully change more lives, as many lives of the young people and general population that we touch. For me, I reserve judgment right now because Motiv8 is everything. So until Motiv8 becomes what I need it to be, so it's like I said, we're at 10%. When we've hit about 40, 50, then I'll know where I'm at. I have certain dreams that I want to achieve in my person. I want to be a father. I want to bring up children in my version of how I see the world, which is we are all one, not denominated by skin color, background, the way you talk, or you know what you want to be. You should only be blocked by your own inability to move to the next level, which is your own challenge. But on a career level, I want to go into the international side of Motiv8. I want to change the way people see us over here. I want to show them that what we're doing over here can be brought out.
Yeah.
So that for me is important. But again, it will change. I know it will. Come back to me in a year and it will hopefully be, yeah, we're at this level now, so we're doing this now, so this is where I'm at. So yeah.
Question from the G-Man. Without football in your life, what would you have been doing, or what would you have done? What would you be doing, or what would you have done?
I'd like to have gone into, funnily enough, what a previous pitch talker is doing. It's film or media. So
there's still a place for you there.
Hey, listen, I'm young enough still. The knees may be gone, but the head's still very, very fresh. Well, for example, when I was a boy, I wanted to work in forensics. I was really keen. That's where I think the student in me was. I'd always watch programs like police programs or detective shows. Big reader as well. I used to read, you know, Sherlock Holmes.
Do you watch Remington Steele by any chance?
I used to.
I love it.
Back in the day.
I love it. I'm not old enough to have watched it back in the day.
Back in the day.
If you want the seasons, I've actually got.
Might have to tap you up
I
for that.
love that show.
I'm not sure where I'm going to get the time for it, but I'll still tap you up for it.
I love that show.
But Christmas, that'll be the time I'll watch it. I'll probably say something in media or even journalism, because I've started writing now for Entourage.com. I'm doing their healthy living and sports stuff. It was a thing. I was told. The reason why I was told is to do it is because obviously with my stuff on Facebook and Twitter and the way I blog on those sites, I haven't started a formal blog yet. Time is an issue. So I certainly think that would have been an area. Film is a big thing for me. And music. I'd love to have been a DJ. Still could. I just have a big thing about it. I'm not saying I'm any good. I just feel I have an ear for a track. Like I spent hours making like mix CDs, like when I was a boy making mixtapes for my little Sony Walkman. I spent hours doing it. Because for me, when I was going for a run or if I was coming home from school, the headphones would be on and I'd be making my own mixtapes. So I would study other people's mixtapes and I was learning how to, and I remember when my cousin many years ago had a, not my cousin, one of my friends, had a mixing decks, the old school style ones, proper scratch decks. We're talking about the early 90s. And we would just spend hours ruining his parents' old records, like the Lionel Richie records and all that, just mixing a bit of soul and Motown. Then we started moving into hip hop and all that, and then whatever. I'm not professing that I'm any good at it, but I reckon I could have been given a bit of thing, because I'm that sort. I get addicted to things, so I've got that sort of personality. And music's that sort of thing. You need to be addicted to it, otherwise you're never going to get it right, because you have to constantly adapt as well. So I think either music or media journalism type thing. And I guess I'm moving into that a little bit with what I'm doing with writing pieces about healthy living and fitness and a bit of sports stuff. But it just shuts me up from talking, to be honest.
You know, what legacy would you like to leave on football? Or on sport in general, we'll open it up.
I'd like to change the way that people see the sport, those who are in it. I want to have more people understanding that sport doesn't have to have barriers. It can be accessible for all in various ways. Be a coach, be it a volunteer, be it a player, be it a fan. I'd like to leave some sort of legacy which shows that sport can be more family orientated and it's accessible for all. Because I think that is a serious problem at the moment, that there are still people who feel disenfranchised with it in one of those many different ways, and that needs to change, because it is for everyone. It's for the people. We need to take it back. It's been taken from us. We need to take it back to where it belongs.
I hear that. Sounds like we the people for the people, which sounds familiar.
Tried to change the words.
Any last words of wisdom?
Just to anyone who's watching this, to stay true to themselves if they're in sport, to be positive, to enjoy what they do. If you're not a sporty type of person, that doesn't really matter. Use whatever skills you've got, and don't let anyone ever tell you that you can't be what you want to be unless you decide that that's the time for you to walk away. A good example of that is the X Factor and the way that the young people in that, I watch it with my family. I watch it because I need to know what young people are into. The interesting aspect to it is the amount of them that say, this is my last chance. There's no such thing as a last chance. You have people who can make it in their lives at 60, at 70, at 80, at 90. You're not limited by age. Age is a number. Age means nothing. I joke about me being old and this and the other. I have people who tell me I look 16 still. So I take whatever people give me as a compliment, whether they say I look my age, I look younger. You're only limited by your expectations, and never ever assume that anything is your last chance. There's no such thing as a last chance. Everything's your next chance.
You know what, yeah. So,
On that note,
yeah, that is a great mantra. And you know what, Smith?
it's been emotional.
Absolutely. I was going to say it's been an absolute pleasure, but emotional. So there was that line from Snatch, I think it is.
Lock, stock. We've probably told you how many times we've seen that.
Yeah.
There you go. So you kept the football vibe
I love
going.
that film. I love that. I absolutely love that film. But you know what, Samir? Once again,
Thank you, my friend.
thank you. And you know what? You've just been a part of another episode of Pitch Talk Meets. Remember, youtube.com/Pitch Talk is where you can find all of our videos. Facebook.com/Pitch Talk. Become a fan, become a friend, become a member of the group. Join the footballing revolution we're working so hard to create. Also, Twitter @Pitch Talk. Connect with us. @Motiv8 SF as well on Twitter. Connect with them too. It's one of them ones, man. But you know what? From me, Straight Shooting LJA, the G-Man, and Jezzy Fizzle, you've been tuned in to Pitch Talk Meets, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us.